there's this funny myth that you need to somehow know what you're doing, but people who know what they're doing don't make interesting work. It's just as simple as that. It's not how many people have I reached. It's of the people that I reached. How many of those did I move?
This is Jacob Collier, and in October 2013, he uploaded this YouTube video that would take him from making videos in his bedroom to selling out arenas all over the world. He's been referred to as the Mozart of Gen Z, and at the age of 29, has already won 6 Grammys.
It's a massive honor to be in this room, such a tintinnabulum of musical brilliance. So thank you for having me.
So on this show, we talk a lot about the business of being a creator. But you really can't get to the business unless you're making truly creative work that's impacting people. And that's what this conversation with Jacob is all about. This is one of those episodes where you're going to want to have a notebook out while you listen. He says a lot of things that you don't want to forget and that will likely spark ideas in your own creative work. And I definitely would recommend checking out Jacob's music if you're unfamiliar with him. We've linked some of our favorite songs in the description, as well as his new album, Djesse Volume 4. All right, now for our conversation with Jacob Collier. Jacob Collier, welcome to the show.
How's it going? Good to see you both.
Good to see you too.
It's going great, man. I'm really excited you're here.
I've been so excited for a long time for this.
You're obviously here in LA because of the Grammys, and you won your 6th Grammy.
That's true.
That's crazy.
It's surreal.
That's wild.
Thanks. Yeah.
But what's I think exceptionally interesting when we think about this conversation is that we actually met at a YouTube event.
We did.
Brandcast. And we had a great conversation backstage.
Yeah.
I remember just being like, wow, that guy is so great to talk to.
I felt the same way.
And then you went on stage and you performed Somebody to Love, and the crowd went nuts. Like, it was like, I was emotional. I felt like I had the chills. I didn't know what to do with myself after this performance. But I did know what to do with myself, which was to go out on stage and deliver some data and insights about YouTube advertising.
Our vibes were completely different.
But it was great though. It worked out fine. It was wonderful.
I'm so excited to have you on the show and talk about
Me too.
Your journey, because your journey does start on YouTube.
True.
I was watching a documentary about you
on
the BBC.
Oh, cool.
Which is one of the first times we've had a guest on the show where I could actually sit and watch an hour and a half documentary about the guest.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal. But there were 2 quotes back to back in the documentary about you, spoken about you, that I thought were really interesting, that sort of speak to your origin. The first is from Chris Martin. And he's talking about how he came across you for the first time, that he puts on this playlist basically to go to sleep. And all of a sudden he hears this one track and he finds it amazing. Turns out it's you. And he thinks to himself,
he must be from the 16th century.
That's the first thought about hearing the music. The next quote is from your mom.
He really was born at the right time.
And I found those to be so interesting, that Chris Martin could say the sound felt old, but that this was the right time for you to be born.
That is interesting. Yeah, I'd forgotten that they edited that back to back. That's clever editing. But I do often think about the time I've been born into, and I do think I'm great. Well, I am very grateful for being here now. Even I think 5 years in either direction would have certainly changed the trajectory of my creativity. So I think that, you mentioned YouTube. I think there was a particular space, I think, at that time for content creators who didn't necessarily want to, or weren't interested so much in the idea of sort of conforming to something like an algorithm or a particular format, but were more interested in making stuff that they thought was really cool. And I contributed to YouTube because I felt like it was kind of the broadest space for me to do things on my own terms. I just thought, well, this is interesting to me. This is so interesting that I want to share it. And never really thought too much about having a career. But that was the magic of YouTube at that time, is that things could be on their own terms. And then fast forward, I suppose, 10 years, I've seen YouTube change a lot. I've seen the music industry change a lot. I've changed a lot. And I'm sure you two feel the same way. The whole climate has changed. The way we conceive of things has changed. I think there's a far greater fatigue of bright packaging, in a sense, and competitive psychology. but there's also, so it's also really fun and more irreverent, I think, than it's ever been in certain ways. So I don't know, looking at the last, 29 years of my life and the ways in which I valued and seed and perceived the opportunity to be creative and offer things into the world, it's been an extraordinary time to do that in. And I do feel very lucky that I was around for that little nook of, 94, I suppose, to enter the world and find myself in this place.
I think there's one word that you just used that I think is an important word. You said decided to contribute to YouTube. Like, I think that is, that felt a lot like the energy 10 years ago. And I think that's actually something that has changed dramatically over the past decade, is that there's a time where it felt like we were all offering contributions of our creativity or our self-expression to this platform and to this moment in time that was the democratization of voice. And I think today, just as all things progress, there's more of a thought of what can I get from it?
Oh yeah.
Right? Than what can I give to it? And I think that's one of the challenges with young creatives today is there's too much awareness of what could happen if you post something that works.
And your mind gets wired into that constantly,
Yeah.
And it's even like in this situation, there's 3 cameras here, right?
Yeah.
And it's so easy to be like, oh, so I'm going to come across like this to this. So I'm just going to, and because we are beings that are sensitive to what's around us and we perceive actively and we're emotional and we, I just think it's a dangerous time to be too spongy to those forces. And it's
curious
wild. Yeah.
about that era for you, like a decade ago, posting YouTube videos. Your first video is this iTunes visualizer, which is fantastic.
Huge fan of the iTunes visualizer.
That was an epic era of youth. Like to put on a song and just let the iTunes visualizer
I loved
entertain
it
you.
so much.
It was an amazing era.
I'm surprised there's nothing quite like that right now.
There really isn't.
That everyone
but
can
I don't know
access.
if we have I don't know if that's enough stimulation for the present moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you took a screenshot of your video, this acapella video, and you made a series of these acapella videos. But the cover of "Don't You Worry About a Thing."
Yeah.
You took a screenshot when you first posted it that said no views.
Yeah.
And that's the video that you were discovered.
Right.
Why did you take that screenshot?
I don't know. There have been certain moments feel important, and I was just so proud of it. I was so proud of it. I thought, this will hopefully not have 0 views in a few days, and maybe have like 100 or 1,000 or something. So I took the screenshot, and it just felt like a moment of this is happening right now. And even just the layout of YouTube looks so different in the screenshot. The really old-fashioned kind of thumbnails, and it's all kind of more straight lines. There's less curves and flounces and all that kind of stuff. But it's a funny thing to sit and make things by yourself for a long time. And I did that when I was a child. I had and still have this amazing room in London, like a sort of a cavernous nook, you could say, filled with like this infinite potential for ideas. And it's the room that I learned to walk in. And I made all those videos in that room. And when you make things by yourself, there is a moment when the first time when you share that idea, it does feel significant because literally nobody, I mean, my mum came in and brought me some baked beans or something, but like literally no one has heard this other than her and maybe my 2 sisters. And so that moment when you press the button, it does feel big, especially when you're young and starting out and you don't know what's going to happen and you're not sure and you think, oh, Shift Command 3, publish. It just kind of felt right.
That's amazing.
Were there other people, other young musicians who were uploading to YouTube that gave you that framing that, this could be something big? To hit publish could mean something.
I think to me, the value of making something when I was young was like how deep it went. Like it's created proportions. So I would see things and be like, I can't believe you can do that. You can do that. You can do that. You can do that. What? And so, my heroes were people who, I think for all of us, your heroes are people who make things possible for you. They reveal that things are possible for you. And I'm pretty sure I saw videos around that time of, people splitting their own selves in different parts. I know that Jack Conti, I don't know if you guys have hung with Jack Conti.
Yeah, of course
I'm sure you have.
Had him on the show.
Yeah,
Oh, great, amazing.
Jack's awesome.
So Jack was actually one of my earliest kind of supporters on YouTube. I think that's 2014. He reached out and just offered to help me out. He's such a giving guy. He was kind of like, if you ever need any help getting new gear, getting new microphones, I'm here, I'm helping. I'm just a huge fan. And that was before Patreon and everything for him. It was just when he was a content creator. But I remember seeing Pomplamoose videos from 2009 where they were chopping up screens and just being interesting. And to me, I think when I was young, that was the epitome, sort of, irrespective of any kind of reach, like the value was found in how much does this wake up my soul? Like, how interested am I in this, So when I made something I was very interested by, I felt like I was doing the right thing. And I as I said before, I think YouTube was it made that uniquely available for creators at that time, psychologically somehow. And it's funny, I've been thinking recently a lot about the difference between participating and contributing. I was actually talking to my friend Blake Mills about this the other day. Blake was also playing with Joni Mitchell at the Grammys, which I was a couple of days ago. And we went to Joni's house to rehearse. And it's an extraordinary thing to go to Joni Mitchell's house anyway, let alone with such incredible musicians and surrounded by such amazing forces and each with their own perspective. But the first time we played Both Sides Now, we were all participating, right? But by the time we played it for the 5th or 6th time, we were all contributing. But it took that moment of time to see a space for yourself or make a space for yourself and visualize how that would feel and extend your limb into that space. And at first, you're along for the ride, you're paying attention, and then gradually you learn how to be like, there I am, that's me. And I can pull and I can push, and then it starts to flow. It's a beautiful feeling. And I actually think a little bit, it was a bit like that with YouTube at first for me. It was kind of like my first kind of offerings were, okay, I can put droplets into the ocean and let's see how it goes. And then eventually you feel like, okay, so having presented these things and feeling the way I do about the way that I've done it and watching the response and things, I now feel like I can more actively contribute something. But I think there's a rush nowadays to feeling the need to contribute off the bat. It's like, hey, find your voice and then make a record. That's crazy to me because you have to make a bunch of records in order to find your voice at all. And you don't have to come in blazingly contributive. You can come in blazingly open and ready to be taken by surprise by yourself. And if you do it right, as I'm sure you both have found too, if you do what you're doing right, you're constantly surprised, not only by your surrounding, collaborators and guests in your case, but by yourself, and I know if I'm surprising myself, I'm doing something right, but it has taken a long time to feel like that comfort has come. And when people say, you have to just know what you're doing constantly and you have to come into the industry with a plan and all this stuff. I didn't think about having a plan or the industry when I was starting. I just thought about trying to find a way to make things that felt like they mattered to me.
I love that. I think that's super important. And what we were talking about before, we all do know what the final outcomes can be, of putting our work out there. And it is important to stay in that pocket. I'm curious for you, when you are young and you're putting out these videos on YouTube and you do start to get positive feedback, whether it's viewership or an email from Quincy Jones, how do you start to separate the response that you're getting, the positive response, from staying true to yourself in that room?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think positive and negative feedback can be equally damaging / helpful, depending on how you perceive it,
Can you walk us through that moment though, like the outcome of that video that you posted?
Yeah. So, well, I've been making things for a while. So this was sort of, I suppose it was like 2 years into making videos, and I kept trying to one up myself creatively. So I started by, as you say, chopping up iTunes Visualizer, assembling it into a form, which actually was a really helpful activity. It made me realize that I could edit videos and I enjoyed doing it, but I never thought of myself as a video editor before. So that helped me a great deal. And then the next one, I tried doing some split screen stuff. And this was when I had iMovie, and it was like old iMovie, and it was really hard to do. You had to render the whole video out and put it back in and then render the whole video out. And it was just this like gnarly process. And as the videos went on, I became more comfortable in creating them. In fact, a quick and funny story. I was at school, and the reason I made my first video was because there was a concert in my school called the Sound Image Movement concert. And in order to be in the concert, which was like super cool, and everyone wanted to be in the concert because it's just rad, you had to have a video. I had plenty of music, but you had to have a video to play with your song. So I thought, well, I have to make something to look at. What's the most fun thing to look at that's the easily sourceable. Oh, it's iTunes Visualizer, right? Because you can just press the button and turn on this app and out it comes. So I printed out a bunch of that, and then I chopped it up and organized it around my song and put the video up. But I wanted to make split screen videos because I wanted to show the multitudes of what was going on in my head and in the process. So I remember asking a teacher, hey, do you have any ideas about like multi-camera software? And he sort of said, well, we have this program called Final Cut Express here at school. And I said, well, is there any way I could take it home? Because I really want to just go ahead and make stuff. And he sort of said, well, unfortunately, I can't do that for you, Jacob, because it's a school policy, blah, blah, blah. But, I really hope that you figure out a way to get your hands on it. And fast forward a few weeks, I went into his office for something else, I think just to ask a question about something different. And he answered my question. And then as I was leaving, he said, I just want to say again, Jacob, I'm sorry that I couldn't help you out with Final Cut Express. But, once again, I hope that you find a way to make the things you want to make. And he just dropped a little CD on the desk as I was walking out the room, unlabeled. And I went home and put it in my computer, and it was Final Cut Express. And it was such a moment. It was such a moment.
That's amazing.
Such an important moment. So based off of that, rather unruly software at that time, I went on to make a bunch of these videos. And Don't You Worry About a Thing was, a few videos in. It was after I'd done a few different a cappella videos, but I wanted to start playing instruments because that was a huge passion of mine. And I wanted to show people what was going on. I figured it would help them kind of have an eye and an ear in. It's like opening a window into the process, because sometimes when you listen to music, especially if it's multi-layered and complex, it can maybe feel quite opaque to peer into. You can be moved by it, but not necessarily understand it. So I wanted to say, hey, I'm not like, I have nothing to lose by showing you everything I'm doing here. So here's a guitar, a castanet, a shaker, double bass, 6 vocals, and this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that video, for whatever reason, that video struck a chord. Pun not intended. And it was this quite a transparent rendering in a sense of like what I was up to, what I was doing. And I've always loved that song by Stevie Wonder. It's just a total timeless banger. And I released the video, and it was quite an extraordinary week. I've got to be honest, because, well, whoever you are in music, if you're growing up in the 21st century or 20th century, Quincy Jones would have been someone who contributed to something you care about. It's just unavoidable. So receiving an email from Quincy was a hoot. It was totally and utterly bizarre and wonderful. I did think someone was pulling a ridiculously well-executed prank. They'd gone to the lengths of getting a @quincyjones.com email and everything. It's like, how did you do this? But it was Quincy, and we jumped on Skype at 7 a.m. A few days after the video came out, and Quincy wanted to talk to me about the chords. He was like, where'd you get those chords from? And I was like, oh, because I thought he'd ask me questions like, hey man, Quincy, music industry, blah, blah, blah. He was just curious about like, hey man, can you explain like what's the second chord of the, and I was like, well, it's actually a F7 with a sharp 9. Yeah. And it's like, oh man, I thought there was a sharp 11, and it was just total like kinship. It was just like, oh, so you speak my language, I speak your language. We can totally hang, And then he flew me to Switzerland a few weeks later, and we met in person. The whole thing was just very surreal.
Yeah, it is surreal. I think as like artists and creatives, we talk about this quite a bit on the show, but like the ultimate validation as you go throughout your career is typically like you want to be respected by your peers or people that you look up to. Is like one of the greatest forms of encouragement. And that to me, when I hear that story, that's a pretty early shot of validation to receive, right?
True.
Like they were very mini for us in our career. Like you go a little bit and someone says like, hey, that was a pretty good video. And you're like, oh my God.
Oh, really?
I guess I could keep going.
Right, totally.
You need these like little boosts.
It has an impact. It really has a massive impact.
Yeah.
Or that feeling just that you're not alone. Like you said, speaking the same language.
Yeah.
That was, I felt, do you know what the feeling I felt with Spinning Quincy was? Like a deep relief. And it wasn't relief because I was worried about Quincy being nasty to me or something. It was relief that there were people out there who were hearing me, who were seeing me, the things I was making, and all the detail, every detail, because it was so detail oriented. It was color correcting 32 videos and making them absolutely symmetrical, and it's just everything was so kind of thoughtful about those videos. And for someone like Quincy to say, I hear that note, I hear that chord, I see it, I feel it. That to me is always so magical. The idea that I can see myself in you, and then you see yourself in me, and that feels like collaboration to me, more than validation almost. It was like we're meeting as people who make things. We're meeting in a place That's what like life is about somehow.
And you're self-taught, correct? In
Yeah,
music?
yeah. Largely, I had a few teachers along the way. A lot of them were just my heroes, but also I had a couple of piano teachers and sort of thoughtful teachers who explained concepts to me. But fundamentally, yeah, until I was about 17, I was a lone voyager, and I would say that nothing's ever really done in isolation, especially now, especially with the internet. You know, when I talk about contributing something, I was contributing something to a conversation that was already happening, and you learn and you gather and you share, and it's a constant give and take. But I remember being 8 years old. Well, I remember being 2 years old, and my mum saying, "Hey, here's a violin," because my mum was an incredible violinist and conductor and a few other things, and I played violin for 2 years, from 2 to 4. And when I was 4, I said, "I'm giving up. This isn't the right axe for me." And not giving up music, but this violin is not it wasn't lighting me up. I think it's because I was maybe too impatient. With a violin, you have to work for many years before you can make one note sound good. But for me, I wanted to poke up piano or hit a drum and have it go bang and feel that feeling and be able to sit and dig into something that was more tactile for me. So. And my mum has always been totally chill with that kind of thing. I remember being 8 years old and my mum saying, you know, "Would you like piano lessons?" And I said, "Well, no, not really." And so, "That's fine, no worries, it's fine." I think that was one of my greatest blessings personally for me. I think is that I wasn't pressurized into doing that stuff.
I think that makes you much more connected to the craft, whether it's music or like Colin is fully self-taught when it comes to editing. And I went to film school and I learned how to edit in a certain way. But when I would watch Colin edit, he would do things that were very intuitive in a way that was like you could only learn it by feeling something in your body, like putting something on the screen and going, "That felt good." Yeah. How do I do, I have a thought, how do I do this?
Exactly.
And you don't actually get that through a classical way of learning because you're actually taught something. And then you have this amazing quote actually that I want to read. Let me pull it up. I just thought about this. It says, "I used to think your ears dictate everything. If you heard it, you could play it. If you give yourself a capacity that is greater than your ears, then your ears sponge up all the technique and grow as well."
Yeah, right.
I thought that was kind of an interesting interplay of that conversation. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think there is this constant conversation internally for all of us creatives who share and play and create and improvise between what you know and what you feel. And actually what you feel is always closer to the real world than what you know. Thoughts are a few steps removed from reality, away from feeling, which is interesting. So if you're learning from here, but then you're reinforcing from here, there is like an amazing sort of balance that you can find at certain moments that where both kind of catapult the other into this new place. I love that each of you have a different format in a sense of that learning, and you're able to combine and collage those forces, because I think that's the dream. You know, you can't necessarily do something totally. I mean, you can do whatever you want, literally. But if you were to create things solely intuitively or solely cerebrally, then I think that there's some potential for cross-pollination that is potentially a shame to lose out on, because that marriage is so important. And fundamentally, whether we like it or not, we all have belief systems and frameworks of understanding things. It doesn't matter how intellectual you think of them as being. You know, so I know a lot of extraordinary musicians, Joni Mitchell being one of them, who if you play her like a F major 7 sharp 11 chord, she'd be like, "Oh yeah, I know that chord, but I couldn't tell you what that chord is, what the name of it is." And like there were no names to begin with; it was just sounds, right? Yeah. So, and same thing is it's true with editing. There was no book, there was no rule book, there are no lines to stay within. You just have to make a mark and see where it fits within the lines. And I think when it comes to creating anything, I really, really think there's a lot of the paralysis for me, and also for many other people I've spoken to and worked with over the years. The hardest thing to do is to make the first mark, because you think, "Oh, what if it's the wrong mark, or what if I mess it up, or whatever?" And it's natural, and we are programmed to think in that way. But there's something really beautiful about I suppose it's like the confidence to make mistakes, the courage to make mistakes. And I don't know what you'd say, Colin, about this in editing, but it's like you can't begin your journey as an editor by going in and thinking, "I have to do this right." In the same way you can't begin songwriting thinking you have to write a great song. It goes back to what we were saying earlier on about you can't contribute until you've learned a bit about who you are. You have to just throw paint and see what happens. I started touring the world about 8 years ago, And those early shows were me figuring it out, and I'm still figuring it out. But having it all figured out is overrated, because not only is it impossible to know how you feel or who you are going into things, but the more certain you are about who you are and what your brand is and what your plan is and what matters to you, the less opportunity there is for like happy accidents and things to come from the side, and for you to be surprised and confused and befuddled. And some of my favorite moments of all time in live performance situations, studio collaborations, songwriting processes, conversations, are when you go off book,
Yeah.
And I learned that from many, many years of not having a book. And then someone says, hey, have you read the book? And I'm like, I don't know if there's a what book, And I felt like that coming into learning the piano or the bass, but I also learned that coming into the music industry, and it's like, so this is how you have to do it. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And I think, well, I can only warn you from my experience, this doesn't work, and you can't do it like this, you can't do this, and you can't do this. And the number of people over the years that I've had to sort of sit quietly but surely say, I'm not going to do the thing that you want me to do. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to do the thing you want me to do. I'm here to do the thing that I want to do. It's so simple. But it's like you're not told that necessarily when you're coming up. You're told there's a way that you have to do things, and that goes for everything. Releasing music, writing songs, and editing videos. It's like we're constantly all learning. None of us really know what's going on. Mm-hmm. The best we can do is be really open, and build a language out of the things that we like.
Yeah, I will often go back and watch some of my earliest edits, and I will be surprised at what I did or what I left in, realizing that maybe now I have a vocabulary for some of those decisions.
Yeah.
But back then there was nothing. There was nothing but intuition.
Yeah.
And I found
powerful
that when I watch some things I edit today, that they're further than I would like from some of those early edits that I did not have vocabulary for.
Yeah.
And I'm at a moment where I take inspiration from sometimes the earliest work that I've made.
I can relate to that sometimes, actually. The feeling that you had this like lucidity or inability to know what you were doing that guided your North Star. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame when you feel like you lose touch. I don't think you ever really lose that center pillar. But going back to what you're saying about validation, one of the dangers of validation is that it locks you in to yourself.
Yes.
And it's like, it's like it deepens your self identity, which is great, but also dangerous, because the moment you know who you are, you stop learning. If you say, I'm definitely this, and Jacob Collier means this and that, Colin, Samir, or we're the people who do this one thing. Who are you to know what you're here to do? And it goes back to the thing you were saying earlier on about people making things and wanting to get things out of it in a sense. It's like, I actually think, a more interesting question to ask of, say, the universe, is rather than saying, what do I want from life? What do I want to get from my life? It's, what's the best way to put this? What does life want from me, I suppose? What does the universe want from me? What could I contribute of value here? It's a completely different way of thinking.
You do have to be very open for that question. And you also have to be comfortable with time. You have
That's a great point.
Which I think today, it's harder and harder to get comfortable with the fact that things take time.
Yeah.
The fear of making the wrong mark creatively first is actually the fear of not having enough time. It's the fear that if I don't do this now, I'm behind, or I'm not going to get there. When actually there's no there, it's just the constant exploration. But I think, there's some beautiful things to like the communal nature to how we all live digitally now. But there's also challenges of us living in a world that is one big digital community that we don't allow as much time, because you watch someone else where someone else is, and you're like I look back, and this journey to sit right here has taken 13 years, right? And at that time, I thought it was going to take 2 years. And as I look back at this last 13 years, I'm like, obviously it's taken 13 years.
Yeah.
And now I can have a bit of patience. But on a micro scale, day to day, I don't have as much patience when you have pressure, when you're building a business, when there's other people involved.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the pressures now create there's new stakes to your creativity. Now, I want to go back to something you said about breaking, I guess, rules of how things typically happen in the industry, and also an exploration of fear or your lack thereof. You go to Switzerland to meet Quincy Jones. You also meet Herbie Hancock there. That's right. And what happens next? Like, what was Quincy's, I guess, intent with you? Because obviously this is a guy who's been a pivotal figure in the music industry. He can spot talent. He also, if I'm in your shoes, I'm looking at this and going, here's my career, right? I can work with Quincy Jones and now I can find myself to a career. So what happened there in Switzerland and what happens next?
It's funny, I didn't think of it like that so much. I think I met Quincy and thought, this is so cool because I get to ask you questions about life and music, and isn't that amazing? But I was very suspicious of anyone who wanted to snap me up and make me into a star, as they say. I thought, well, that's not true. That's not real. And I don't know why I had this inherent.
So you didn't have aspirations to be like a star?
No, I didn't. I didn't care about being a star, but I did want to make beautiful work. And I thought, it's cool that I now know Quincy Jones because he makes beautiful work. That just feels cool. I feel so cool right now. But I didn't think I'm going to leverage this for my own gain. I just there's nothing wrong with hustling and having that vibe, but I think I'm just not built like that. That's not how my circuitry works. I don't look at something and think, right, I can get something out of this. I just thought this is so cool and so amazing, and my job is to be open to being present here, and that's hard enough because it's just so overwhelming. But Quincy and his team wanted to manage me to their management team, and I said no. With total, utter adoration and respect for Quincy. I knew I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do things my own way.
Why didn't you want to do it? Like, what was it about? Because I do find that to be so interesting. Like, I put myself in your shoes, and it's like, here's someone I look up to, who has a ton of respect in the industry. I mean, arguably the utmost respect in the industry, and wants to manage me. I'd be like, absolutely, let's do this.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I look back and it's like, whoa, that's
that's a pretty gutsy move.
I guess it's.
Yeah.
I guess it's.
Did you know what your own way even meant?
No, but I knew that the only person I could ever know that is me, and I think I knew that it would just be diluted if it was someone else's way. I don't know. I say these things as though I knew what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just had a really strong intuition. Going back to what we were saying before, and I'm very glad I did that. And Quincy was like, totally. And what I really said was like, let's be friends. I said, let's be friends to him and his team, and they're all amazing. Fast forward 2 years, I was making my first album in my room, and I was making it by myself, self-produced and self-mixed and all this stuff. And I did begin to work with his team, slowly but surely. And it was like, hey, actually, I don't know how to book a flight, or like, how do I get a gig, And so Quincy's team, partly just because Quincy is the person he is at the Montreux Jazz Festival in Switzerland, he got me my first gig. And my first gig was opening for Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea on the big stage at Montreux. And I didn't have a show. I didn't have any show. 2 weeks later, I receive a Facebook message from my really dear friend, Ben Bloomberg, who is just a maverick, technical-minded, amazing guy. And he was currently at that time studying for a PhD at MIT in Boston. And he said, if you ever want to make stuff together, give me a call. I've made some stuff for Bjork and Imogen Heap, and I thought that's cool. That's how you get me. You say, hey, do you want to make something with me?
Yeah.
Not, hey, I have an agenda, come and be a part of my agenda, which is not really what Quincy was saying. But I think I flew to Boston, my first time in the States, by myself, and I went to Boston, met Ben, and we built this musical instrument called the vocal harmonizer there and then. And it's this instrument where you sing a note and you play a chord, and every note that you're playing is sung by your voice. It's like a sort of instantaneous real-time choir instrument, which I still play on stage now. And in the process of making that instrument, we just became like such close friends, and we really felt like our mentalities sort of very compatible with each other. And so we built a one-man show, which was me in the center of a circle of 12 musical instruments. And we built some loopers. We had a couple of Kinect 3D cameras on stage that monitored and captured my skeleton. And when I would make a loop, I would physically step out of my own body on stage, and there'd be multiple Jacobs on the stage. When I played the harmonizer, there were multiple heads on stage. They were all captured in real time. It's really janky tech, but it was really exciting. And that was the show that I debuted at Montreux. And so you speak about fear. Here's a 20 freshly 20-year-old kid who basically has never done a show before, like never done a gig. I'd done small gigs in London, like on piano and with my friends, but no, I'd never done a gig. And I walked out on that stage in front of 3,500 people and played for 30 minutes. And Quincy, Herbie, Chick were just sitting on the side of the stage watching me, you know. And it's like another one of those Shift Command 3 moments. You think,
Yeah.
okay, here I go. What's going to happen? I don't know. I was so excited to do the show, and it was a moment. And sometimes people ask me, you know, what was the moment you feel like you made it? You know, when did you really make it?
Yeah.
Which is a very strange thing to say, really. And I don't think I've made it yet, maybe. But every moment feels like you've made it in a sense. Like it felt like I'd made it when I uploaded my first YouTube video. It felt like I'd made it when I played that first show. It felt like I'd made it when I met Quincy, when I won my first Grammy, you know. But it also felt like I'd made it when I, you know, like was having a hard day, but like still made something anyway, you know. Or when I came back from a tour and like emptied the dishwasher.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a human. I'm in my body. I've made it back to my body, you know.
Can I ask you just a quick tour question? This
Yeah.
is like a bit of an aside. You come back from a tour.
Yeah.
Do you unpack your bag that night?
No.
You let it hang?
No, oh my God.
How long
no,
do you let it
definitely
hang?
not. Oh, it's anywhere between, if I'm super well slept, maybe like under 24 hours, but normally it's like 4 or 5 days.
Okay, good.
Come back
Yeah.
from tour is hard, man.
I can imagine.
It's
I come
that
back
is
from like a
hard.
weekend trip and my bag is sitting on the bed for a week.
It's
you know,
a weird thing to come back from.
Yeah.
It really is. But you know, surviving those kinds of changes of mental environment, physical
Yeah.
environment, ego environment, it's all part of it, but it is interesting.
So that first gig, do you have an understanding of how different it is to play in your room versus playing for people? Because I look at, you know, your live show now,
Yeah.
and you look like such a natural, like you are so comfortable with the relationship you have with the audience, with the way that you interact with them. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, but I'm curious, that first gig, are you like, oh, whoa, there's two sides to this. There's me putting the music together.
Yeah.
And there's me showcasing it.
Absolutely. And the amazing thing about the Montreal Jazz Festival, for anyone who ever plays there, is that it's all filmed in 4K. So I have the video.
Oh,
And
wow.
It's wild. And it's me on stage kind of like in my own world. I'm just in my own world. And I have so much love for that Jacob. I'm like, you go ahead, man. When you're in the world, you go ahead. You sing those songs.
You don't worry about those people.
Yeah.
You do it.
Yeah. But it is amazing to watch how internal I am, you know. And it's not internal in a sense of like closed, because I've always been very open, I think. But it was internal in the way, it's like the direction of my energy was different. Now my energy goes like this when I'm at my most comfortable. But back at that time, the energy went into the music, and I would pull people's attention into the music, which is an important part of my process for me, because how would I know how to, you know, one thing I sort of thought as a child and was led to believe as a child was that, you know, you have to go on stage and pretend. You have to go on stage and be like, you know, which I've just never, ever been that person or that kid. I was never a theater kid, you know, nothing wrong with theater kids, but just, again, it's just not me. And so I had to forge my own relationship with the stage, where it wasn't based in kind of forced extroversion or pseudo confidence or exaggeration of self. You know, it was just about being honest. And so it's funny. It's like, because I was like, my inherent energy has always been unwilling to be dishonest on stage. I just can't do it. I can't not be exactly who I am, kind of ever, maybe in a sense. But I'm very me. And on stage, I tried sometimes to be like, hey, you guys, what's up, Toronto? You know, and it just doesn't. To me, it was just kind of like, I look like an idiot. I look like I'm pretending. In the same way I look like an idiot, I sound like an idiot when I'm trying to write a song that sounds like something on the radio. I can write those songs, but I was just like, that's not me talking. It's like looking at a photo and being like, that's not me in the photo. That's like a picture of someone else. So I had to kind of have patience with myself. That was my main job, is to have patience with myself and wait for myself, for it to be natural for me to be comfortable in this direction. And sure enough, I'm still expanding really, but within about 2 or 3 years, I'd gone from this kind of energy to kind of like this kind of energy.
Yeah.
You know? And then within 3 years on from that, it was like this kind of energy. And then there was COVID, which was weird.
Yeah.
And it was like, and then I came back from COVID and it was like, bang, you know. And it was just, I think it's just very interesting to watch. Like, I'm as interested as anyone else to see what happens to me. You know, it's like, oh, this feels natural to me right now. That's interesting,
Man,
you know. And I'm like my own audience member in a sense. I'm not in control of who I am, but my job is to make space for who I am. That's my job, and it's a different job from.
That's beautiful.
How do you navigate nerves, or do you have nerves? Do you have nerves?
Yeah, I don't know if I have any nerves.
There's no nerves.
No, I know. I definitely feel nervous. I think my relationship with it has changed. I don't think it doesn't bother me anymore. Like being on stage or being off stage, it doesn't affect my nerves anymore, for example. But I am still nervous nonetheless it's the same thing as anyone. If someone's in the room that I really respect, you really want to, you want to make sure that person has a good time. You want to show that person, you want to be seen by that person. And so whether that's like me in a little listening party or me in an auditorium or in an interview, whatever, it's like there are a certain amount of nerves that come from being a human. But I don't worry so much anymore about, oh God, what if they hate me? I think there's part of me that's kind of like, that kind of like enjoys it a little bit of like, maybe I'm really bad. Cool, Like
Tension is exciting.
That's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Like, it's cool to not, like, being good is overrated as well. It's like, it's like, okay, maybe you think I'm like, maybe you really don't like the song, or you think I'm a klutzy, or it's like, maybe I am. That's cool.
Was there any added layer of pressure at that time because you were kind of positioned, and still are, but early in your career were positioned as this like creative genius, like
prodigy kids.
Prodigy. Yeah. Was there added layer of pressure to perform in that show where Quincy and Herbie are like, here's the guy. Like, here he is.
I think so. I think there was an amount of that. It's funny. I've been sort of cited as a prodigy kid for like a lot of my life.
Yeah.
Like from way earlier than YouTube and all of that. It was kind of like, oh, Jacob, the kid who can blah, blah, blah. I think it's a label that's quite a tidy way of people understanding you. It's, in a sense, it's quite an impersonal thing to tell someone. Like, oh my God, you're such a genius. That like, there's no bridge there. You can't meet a person if they're a genius. It's like kicking them up into the sky and be like, you can just be up there. I'm going to be here. But it's far harder to meet someone where they are and say, you are a flawed human being, just like me. And you also have this big world of yours. And I respect that.
Yeah.
That's like, to call someone a genius or a prodigy is to kind of write them off as outside your understanding, beyond your understanding. But the thing that a lot of creative people actually require to grow, like any good plant, is to be really like seen and understood. And to say so someone's a genius is to say, I refuse to try and understand you. You're just outside my reach. But I've learned to translate that as, I really, I see you and I respect what you're doing, which is, I think, sometimes what people mean. But I think there was pressure at that time. I think that there's been pressure for that all the time, and there is still now a little bit. But I enjoy the process of gradually, deconstructing the scaffolding around this idea that I'm somehow supernatural. I'm like really natural. I'm not that supernatural, and I'm just a mucky old human. But I'm deeply interested in certain things, and I think it's important that it's like it doesn't feel. I feel very strongly whenever I speak about music or play music or write it that people don't feel like it's this magic power that comes from. It's like only a few people have access to it. Like anyone can access that part of themselves, whether it's in music or in other aspects of life. It's a lot more about comfort, like sort of, feeling comfortable and confident and having permission to make mistakes and be cool with yourself being weird and all that stuff. It's much more about that than it is about like discipline, at least for me. I think some of my greatest gifts come from that side of things, not actually from being technical. So I think in the early days, a lot of the tide that I found myself kind of unconsciously or consciously pushing against was like this idea that I was like an intellectual feat. When I looked at the things I was making and I was like, no, you guys, you haven't got it. Like, this is an emotional presentation for me. Every single thing about this has a purpose and it's proportioned. Everything about this is like coming from here. But because I can also think quickly and I can solve problems in interesting ways and I like to talk about it, I think there was a period where it was kind of like, oh, Jacob is the kid who wants to just think, But and that's cool. You can kind of think whatever you want in a sense about anyone. But I think for me, I definitely knew that wasn't the underlying truth for me. And as the years have gone on, I've enjoyed expanding both sides. But I do think of one of one of the most, like some of the happiest I ever feel, some of the most present I ever feel is not when I'm all up on the pedestal and I'm looking great and I'm feeling, what Grammys or whatever I'm supposed to be. It's when I'm, say, conducting an audience of 5,000 and my voice is as big as everybody else's voice, and they come with me, they lift me up, I lift them up. That feels balanced to me. And this idea of me being this like superior force or like whatever, like I understand why why that comes about, but that just it's not helpful to me to believe it.
I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like one of your greatest superpowers as an artist is your enthusiasm for the craft and for music. And I think to say prodigy or genius underscores how much you potentially like it. Like I think the contagious nature of your art, for me, is what draws me in, even though I don't understand when I hear you speak about music.
Yeah. But
your interest in it, how obsessed it seems like you are and how much you love it, is what makes me drawn to it. And I find that that's something for me across many artists. Like if someone truly loves it, I'm more likely to want to like it with them and be a part of it.
Yeah.
There's a clip on the internet of a kid, and I think it's from a Patreon live stream that you did.
What's your favorite chord?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. What's your favorite chord? Yeah,
it's one of the cutest clips ever. But your interaction is like the most pure kind of, it feels like you guys are seeing each other at eye level and you're experiencing the same childlike wonder that he is in like playing that chord. Like that I don't know why I'm so enamored by that clip, but I've watched that clip so many times over.
That's so nice.
It's such a beautiful moment.
Yeah, children are the wisest among us, I think. And sometimes a child will cut through with a question like that, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's all that actually exists.
All that matters.
That's literally all that matters.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
There's one thing that you keep bringing up now, these like the audience choirs, which have become such a big part of what you do, your live performance, where it almost feels like it shouldn't work, that all these people shouldn't be able to sing, but you're conducting the audience in a way that's making this like beautiful melody. And I want to come back to this concept that you brought up, which was that contribution requires comfort, that like your comfort on stage over years, the repetition of that is what created this ability to recognize, how can I think about this differently?
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really important note for a lot of creatives to be like, hey, you can innovate and do something really unique to yourself. But first, just get comfortable in the flow of it. Like get comfortable in the repetition of it.
Well, I think the key thing there is being comfortable with not knowing what's going to happen next. That's the thing. It's not like have big plush cushions and live in a cloud. You know, it's like, it's be cool with not knowing the next move. And like, if you can figure out how to get a kick out of that, then you've like figured a lot of life out. Because no one knows what's going on right now at all. And there are not solutions to some of the biggest problems on the planet right now. And everyone's uncertain and afraid, and no one knows what's going on and all this stuff. So it's like, if you can figure out how to be comfortable with that, with all the friction, and to alchemize that in your work and in your life, then that's a beautiful thing. I was hanging out with Herbie Hancock yesterday, and he was talking about Buddhism, which is a huge part of his life, and how in Buddhism, one of the greatest teachings that he holds true for him is like, you know, it's his job, his duty, he could say, is to find the lesson in everything. You know, so for example, he was talking about COVID and how he, you know, went into COVID, you know, not knowing why this was happening and what there was to learn. And he really realized, well, what I've learned from COVID is that there's only one family. He says there's only one family on the planet, and it's all of us people. It's where all of us are affected, no matter who we are, who we worship, who we love. COVID is affecting us all. And that hit him really hard, and he was able to understand that. And that's one example for him. That was his words. But I think that happens constantly in life. You know, you're presented with a challenge or a friction or whatever. And if you're averse to those things, then life can be really hard because you make a lot more suffering for yourself than is necessary.
That's another Buddhist principle, which is that all of life is suffering and all of suffering is preference.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Which is an amazing concept.
The thing that people don't tell you this, but you get to make the world. You make it.
Yeah.
There's evidence for whatever you believe. You get to make your own world. And I mean, I love that because I'm a world builder and I think of myself as that, and it appeals to me greatly. I love the idea that you make your own world, but it's so true. And, you know, like, yes, yes, I'm a fraud. Yes, I don't know what's going to happen next. Yes, I am, everyone's lost right now. Yes, the world is ending, you know? On the other side, if you look for love in anything, you'll find it. And if you expect to see love in something, then it's there. And everything, grief, fear, anger, despair, any level of that, it's all love in disguise. It's all people trying to love, but they just can't quite get it out right, you know? And it's just, you watch all these blundering world leaders right now being like, oh, and it's with such devastating consequences in so many ways. And you just think everyone's just trying to love. That's the truth, because there's nothing else to live for. Sometimes you have to look really hard to remember that, you know, in this behavior is somebody who's so in need of love and so looking for, it's like they love a part of themselves that destroys, or they love the feeling of power or lording over and all these things. And it's happened since the dawn of time, and now is a very prevalent time for all those forces. But it's like you honestly get to decide what the world is for and where you are in it. You get to make those decisions. And as a creative person, on whether it's on the biggest levels, on the smallest levels of life, the minutiae, whatever, it's like it's honestly up to you.
I totally agree with that. And I think that exploration of like, to like express love and also to receive love, you know, a lot of creatives, as they go through their journey, their motivation is connected to some level of how they received or didn't receive
love, yeah.
Right? Growing up. And there's elements of self-worth and elements of controlling your environment that a creative can tap into, where I can create this thing.
Or something that feels like the thing that I have or didn't have,
I know you've spoken about your upbringing, and I'm curious if there's elements of any of that tap into your motivation, because as we're having this conversation, it's very clear that your motivations were not necessarily connected to the traditional path of, I want to make it in the industry, I want fame, I want financial success, I want you know, status. There was something else.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about your relationship with expressing love and receiving love as a kid, and how that connected to your
Charlie Kaufman, I think you say his name. You know Charlie Kaufman, the screenwriter. He's one of my favorite thinkers, and he talks about this idea. And I saw a video from him talking. He talks about like the ancient wound. We all have like an ancient wound.
Yep.
We've all got one. It's like the ancient wound is that we're alive in some ways.
Sure.
Oh my God. But yeah, for me growing up, you know, I had two very different parents from each other. You know, my mum is so creative, tapped in, open-minded. To me, I think that, there was certainly an amount of validation I felt like I deeply received. And then a part validation that I feel like I deeply didn't receive. And that unique combination, I think, resulted in me feeling very free and open, and also having this fire to be like, I want to give, I want to show, I want to get, I want to pull, I want to push, you know, and all those forces. So I think every person at a certain point needs to come to an amount of a peace with, this is just who I am. Like, I didn't decide how I was brought up. It's not up to me. And my job is to say, well, these are the cards I was dealt, and you can either sit and complain about it, or you can realize that there's always, it's kind of what Herbie was saying, there's always a way you can look at everything and extract fire from it in a sense. And so, some of the pain of, you know, having parents that separate and all the layers of all of that, and feeling, you know, like part of you is being isolated, part of you is holding on, part of you is letting go, and then you're learning how to grow up and be a man in the world, and you're learning how to find your own voice and figuring out friendships and relationships, all this stuff. I think it all comes down to some of those foundational years for all of us. And I'm really grateful for all of it, because I think that the combination of all those elements, though very complicated, especially at that time, has resulted in me being, having that fire and that desire and that magnetism towards things that feel like they're kind of, you know, they're wild. I think a lot about wildness and tameness, and how important it is to cultivate wildness as opposed to tameness. And
how do you do that?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, it's interesting for me because a lot of my first creative experiments were done in solitude, in controlled environments, you could say, in the sense that I built my own world and cultivated it. But what I've found over the last 10 years of having a career in music and growing up as a human being and as a person in the world is that when things are let to be more in the wild, it's like you take off the collar and you let it run. You don't lose those things. They actually, they run back to you, but you gather fresh air and you gather perspective and you gather wisdom. And I really resent the idea that art is pure if it's in any capacity. The idea that, oh, that's not pure, or you can't do it like that, or art must be made for this purpose or with this in mind, whether it's commercial or art or whatever it happens to be. I really think that something is wild when it's let loose on the world. And the last 10 years of my life, I think, has been a lot of me figuring out how to be comfortable in the wild, because I was in my room for so many years making music. And I have loved the process of unraveling myself, and I'm still in the process of unraveling myself. But going back to what you were saying before, it's like finding that comfort, not just in the unknowing and in the question mark of the world, but comfort with all the parts of me, who I am, the parts of me that are strange or complicated or tangled up. We all have them, and there's something about massaging them and being like, I get it, I'm here. All the proportions, they all make sense, and giving yourself permission to be who you are. You has to start there. And that does go back to, for all of us, the kinds of attention, validation we received as children, the kinds of things we desired, the kinds of things that we experimented with, and then you find yourself in a situation where you're the sum of all your parts, and you have to accept that before you can, to allow yourself to grow.
I imagine. I know growing up as a young boy, like the approval of my father was a highly coveted.
Yeah. That currency is worth a lot.
It's worth a lot. Was that the same for you, or was it the inverse of I'm going to find approval somewhere else?
Well, I think it's all of it. All the external validation you seek, I think, is all the primary validation in disguise. So yeah, I would say there's certainly an amount of, you could say, validation that I didn't traditionally receive from my father. And I think that's the same is true for a lot of people I love and respect.
Yeah.
And yeah, that particular currency matters to a person. And I think that the way in which you grow without that fundamental approval, or what feels like approval, results in a certain kind of desire to find it elsewhere. But at the end of the day, you need to be everyone to yourself, in a sense.
Yeah.
You kind of need to be your own mother and father and best friend. In life. And so I think a lot of growing up and the pain of that and the joy of that is finding ways to source that for yourself. And we all know the feeling, all of us at this table know the feeling of, oh my God, my video got 10 million hits or 100 million, whatever it happens to be. And you think, man, this feels pretty good, man. Woo! I feel validated right now. I did good. And for some people it's like, I feel powerful. For some people, it's like, I feel seen. I think for me, it's probably, I feel seen. That for me, that's a big one. It's like, well, I presented a thing to you and you saw it. Like, well, I feel beautiful right now.
Yeah.
And for other people, it's, I feel sexy, or it's, I feel like I have control, or I feel destructive, or whatever. There's lots of ways you can increase your scale. But learning those proportions and how you respond is like a big part of learning who you are, figuring out who you are.
I feel like you've done a really good job of caring about the process and the present rather than maybe what you could be waiting for. Like, I'm thinking about even Samir bringing up earlier that, 13 years ago, we thought the career would take 2 years. It took 13, but even then we didn't know what it would look like.
Yeah. Well, and in 13 years time, you'll be saying it's taken 26 years.
Of course.
And we thought it would take 13, what I mean?
But we didn't even know we were waiting for this.
Now I don't know.
And you feel like you've released, I feel like you've really released that feeling of, oh, I'm waiting for something to happen.
Right. Well, I think when you get a taste of being in a creative process and being present in that feeling and being in an idea, there is no better feeling than that. So what am I going to chase besides that? Nothing feels better than that. Being in the middle of a tornado of presence of your idea, and like, that feeling when you're like, I think this might work. That feeling?
Yeah.
Wow, it's such a great feeling. Or being on stage and being like, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to do it. Boom. And there's just, that feeling is so
that's a great
special.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you feel that as well.
Yeah.
Why chase anything else?
Yeah.
Like anything that's not going to beget more of that feeling, I'm not interested in. You know?
I think that's when like a creative becomes a creative, is when you recognize like you're very much unsure of what's next. Like you have a great quote. I don't remember exactly what it is, but about that you want life to surprise you. Like you want to leave space for life to surprise you.
Yes. Yeah.
And I very much resonate with that. Like it's just like, you say that of like in 13 years, we're going to say, man, it's taken 26, but I don't even know what 13 years from now looks like.
But you don't need to.
Because I've lived this 13 years where I couldn't have imagined that this is what it looked like.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's the daily practice leads you to these interesting places.
Yeah.
And these
Quincy
micro decisions.
Quincy often says this thing. He says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah.
That's great. It's a classic. But I think, you know what's super overrated is having a dream. I personally think that's overrated. You can dream, but if you have one dream, then you're gonna then you think that dream is the end game. Who are you to know? You know, you can set goals.
I agree with that, but I think that dreams and goals are required to anchor you to the daily practice.
I would say the same is true. I would say dreams and goals are beautiful and great, but don't take them too seriously.
Yeah.
Like you have to loosen your grip on them an amount to be able to be surprised by life, as you say.
I like them with the understanding that I will not land there. I will land somewhere over there.
Yeah.
But at least I'm going for that.
Right. You shoot for the moon and land among the stars.
And I'm going to be comfortable with wherever I touch down.
I suppose to rephrase what I just said, I think being ambitious is wonderful, and being unrelenting is super important. And I think being willing to extend yourself, and as Jim Carrey would say, risk being seen in all of your glory. You know, you just go.
Yeah.
But I think to go with very, very specific, narrow, pointed lenses. I can only speak from my own experience, and I know that the narrower my aperture going into a process, the less impactful the results to me emotionally.
Of course.
And actually sometimes to the people around me too. There are moments where you need to be exacting, and you can slingshot, you get bang, bullseye. That's normally in the middle of a process where you're like, I need to land this exact feeling, I need to land this exact moment, or whatever kind of thing. But in an overarching sense, I think the wisest of us don't really know what's going on, but we do know who we are, and we know what matters to us. And from those things, you can pull goals, you can say, and dreams, and the North Star becomes more palpable and available. And from that, you literally just keep walking.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're going to find something.
I think values are very important to define. It's something that I try and come back to, and they can be evolving, but I think
I completely agree.
Values are very important to define, because then you have your day-to-day, you're living by a set of what are our values.
Whether you define them or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie That Thing You Do?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Should I?
Unbelievable movie. Probably the movie that made me want to become a musician or some type of storyteller or be on stage in some way, shape, or form.
Wow.
But in this movie, there's a moment where they write this song, and it plays on the radio for the first time. And two of them are in a car, and it's in the 1950s, and they freak out, and then they run and find their friends, and they turn it on all the radios in this appliance shop that they work in, and they're hugging and jumping up and down. And that moment of like having your work be discovered or be put out into the world used to be this moment that was reserved for the radio or the Ed Sullivan Show or television.
Yeah.
And I think about your experience as the modern version of that. Of you published your own work, and then it was discovered as this democratized radio, right? That is YouTube or TikTok. And I think like YouTube in the sense that the artists were putting themselves on, TikTok now in the sense that other people are actually choosing and selecting the songs that they enjoy, or the artists and the work that they enjoy. I'm curious just what you think about the current landscape of discovery and artists putting their work out into this incredibly abundant world of creativity.
Yeah, it's a massive question, man. I think I think a lot about this. I think the primary currency that an artist has, besides their perspective, is trust, building trust with an audience.
Agreed.
That takes a different set of materials than engaging them. And this is so crucial, I think, for people to understand who make things. You can engage a lot of people very easily, I think, now. You kind of, you jump through hoops, you notice a trend, you hop on something, you can get eyeballs on your thing. if you really, really want to, I feel like it's possible to do that. What is harder to come by is the relationships between you and the core people within your community. I heard a stat the other day about the music industry right now, which is that 50% of your streams come from 10% of your fans, right? So
Wow.
It's so much about that core. It's not about the radio anymore. It's not about labels anymore. It's about you and your people. And you're like a magnet to your people. And I do think that it's never been more true. I'm excited and encouraged at the sheer variety of different types of content that are flying right now, because I think that you can kind of, the limit is what you can imagine right now, especially with AI, which we can talk about. It's a whole nother conversation. But once the limit becomes what you can imagine, the job of a creative person is to find their people based on the things that are important to them. And you get to decide what matters. That's the thing. So I often think in life and in your career, you kind of have two main currencies. You have your time and your attention. And with those two things, you can create any world you want. But the myth, I think, is that there are these sort of distinct hoops that you need to jump through in order to prove X, Y, and Z to get external thing. As you say, it used to be like that. I'm on the Ed Sullivan Show. I've literally made it. I've just reached a bunch of people. But now it's like, the challenge for creators right now is telling stories that expand over time, and building trust that lasts a long time. And as I say, you can engage people, or I can engage people by reaching them. But the question that I find more interesting when it comes to success, how successful am I, or how successful am I? Is it's not how many people have I reached? It's of the people that I reached, how many of those did I move? Whether that's I reached 20 people, 2 people, 2 million people, 20 million people, 200 million people, whatever that number is, what proportion of those people did I move? And then the question becomes, for any artist, what does it take to move a person? What does that take? And there's only one answer to that, really. And it's to be you, the person who you are, and to tell stories that are true, to tell the truth. You don't have to be honest all the time. And this is exactly how I see everything. But you have to find a resonance in you, something that's true and that matters to you. You will find your people. It just happens. It's magnetism. And I mean, God, the number of times in my career I could have gone, it's like, I could have made a bunch of money, or I could have done this, that, and the other, and written a hit song, or done X, Y, Z. There's obviously luck involved in all these things. You can never guarantee you can do these things. But I'm proud of not having done that. And I'm grateful for the forces outside my control that made me a person for whom those things don't actually just carry the same sequence. They don't turn me on. And so what I've observed in my own career is where I feel the most inspired. I feel inspired when I am surrounded by my people. And your people, whoever you are out there. They're in the world. And you just need to purvey your vibration. You need to say what matters to you. And keep on expanding and pushing and deepening your craft and your interest for your craft. And there are so many ways to do it. You have so much access to tools, and there are many outlets. And it's a weird and dangerous time in a sense to be a creator, because there are so many things that lure you into a sense of, this is what's important. This is what's important. You could be like this and this and that and the other. But the fundamental truth is that there is no one way of doing anything. There are literally no rules. You just have to put yourself out there and start using that voice of yours, and anyone can do that now more than ever, which I'm really encouraged by.
That can be daunting, though.
Yeah.
The expanse universe now, and it's something that I've heard you call creative infinity syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you could define that, because I think it's particularly relevant right now to a lot of creatives.
Do you know what I'd say? I go back to what you were saying earlier on about time and the currency of time and the psychology of time. The biggest myth is that you have to act now and there's a rush. There is no rush. There's just no rush. Victoria Monet won Best New Artist 2 days ago. She's 34 years old. Awesome. That's amazing. She has so much life still to live.
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's amazing that people, and there are these people on TikTok who are in their 80s killing it.
Yeah.
Herbie, 84. He's like just got the Apple Vision Pro yesterday, and he's messing around with all the features. You can start at any time. There is no rush ever, and not just to build on what you've created, but to start over. You can reinvent yourself any day. You're always one decision away from changing your life forever. I always love that quote. I can't remember who said it, but there's no rush to know who you are and what you want to do yet. You will find it, and you are finding it. And as my good friend Steve Vai would say, like, there's no evidence to suggest that you're not right on time, where you are. Everything's going to plan. There's no evidence to support that that's not the case for you. And I can think of times in my life where I've been really disoriented, or I've lost my feeling like I know where I'm going, or I'm not feeling inspired, and look back at those moments and saw what happened. It felt like the thing was going wrong. It felt like I was losing the thing. But actually what was happening is I was just halfway around this loop, the circuit, to get back to this. But from here, you can't see this bit. But you just need to have faith that you're moving in the right direction. And I think it's a very important thing to remember that. And you can't look at anybody else who's making work and compare yourself to that person as though that person is you, because that person doesn't have the privilege you have of being you. How could they ever know what your story is to tell? And there are so many ways to tell stories now, and you don't have to get it right first time. You don't have to start a podcast and win. You don't have to write a song and write the best song in the world. You don't have to do that. You can write a song, you can make a video, you can play a show, you can collaborate, you can change shape, especially when you're just beginning the process of curiosity about something. It always begins with being curious. You can't begin with being an expert. It's like there's this funny myth that you need to somehow know what you're doing, but people who know what they're doing don't make interesting work. It's just as simple as that.
I want to ask you about the role of the audience in creative work.
Yeah.
You mentioned that what matters is that you move people, and that you need to be a magnet for your people. We were speaking about it the first time we spoke, about how Rick Rubin has that great sort of quote of
the audience comes last.
The audience comes last. And when I read that, I resonated with that at first. I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I should be creating for me to be true to me.
Yeah.
Although many times in my career, the audience does not come last.
Yeah, right.
And is a high consideration.
I had the same response to you the first time I saw that. I thought like, okay, Rick, yeah, I get it. Like,
yeah,
go ahead. And then I thought about it more, and I did a lot of research about Rick. And to me, the crux of that is, this is for everyone, or this is for me, right? And my perspective of this is a particular one, because I made a lot of my first work for me. So that's not novel to me. What was novel to me at age 20 was to make something for others and with others. That felt new and interesting and inspiring. My trajectory of creativity has gone away from making things for me and towards making things for others, and I love it. And so I worry about this, the strong prevalence of an attitude like the audience comes last, partly because I also believe that there just is no one way of doing anything. I feel as a deeply creative person, I would critique Rick in a sense that I don't think his audience is creative people. I think his audience is people who aren't creative, for whom creativity is novel. And they're thinking, gosh, wow, I'd never even thought that you could make something for yourself, But I feel like anybody who's inherently creative in some way knows that there's no one way to do anything. You can make work for people. You can make work for an audience. You can conform to the algorithm. You can make an engaging thumbnail. That's cool. You can also lock yourself up in a room, like I did for many years, and make stuff that you just deeply, deeply care about, that has never been made before and will never be made again. That's cool as well. And for anyone to say there's only one way of being, I think is flawed and maybe unhelpful. Though I would say that if anyone who's watching this has watched a Rick Rubin video and felt inspired, fuck yeah. Like, that's great. Like, who am I to say don't be inspired? But I would just say that, I've learned so much. I've learned there's so much more to the process than make work only for yourself. Rick has this chapter in his book where he talks about, picture yourself on the top of a mountain, and at the top of the mountain is like a luxury haven with perfect plushy pillows and an amazing view, and where no one can never disturb you. And then he says, this is the nature of great art. I just disagree with that. I disagree. Because I think great art is when you walk down the mountain from the chilly cold lack of oxygen to the warmth of the village, and you exchange stories and food and energy, and you meet people where they are, and you say, this is for you, not this is for me. I also think more than ever before, we live in a world where it's unhealthy and irresponsible to say things in silo and not to be challenged. And I think that Rick describes his beliefs and writes his book like he's not starting a conversation. He's stating things as though they're true. And I get it. Like, I do that sometimes too. As a creative person, in order to iterate your ideas, it helps to write them down as gospel truth and as fact and whatever. But I think all the wisest and greatest and most important creatives and producers, I mean, Rick is a producer, it's even more important for him than anyone else, is to ask the right questions, not give the right answers or any answers. Questions last way longer than answers. They're more important, they're deeper, they're more crucial. And in the age of AI, creators are going to be more and more asked to prompt with the right question than know with the right answer. Like, I'm excited about this idea of a question culture rather than answer culture. So I look at Rick and it's like, has anyone ever debated him on this stuff? Because there are ways of approaching creativity. As someone who's solved a lot of problems myself and has my own particular angle on things, I'm not the ultimate angle. I'm me, I'm Jacob. I see the world the way I see it. But I'd love to sit with Rick at one point and just talk to him and chew the cud and push him. And I'd also welcome to be pushed, because all of us need to be examined. Our opinions need to be examined and squeezed and broken. And I just think that anyone who sits there saying, this is the one way to do it, Rick says things like, art is only pure if it's made for only art's sake. Absolutely false. You can make totally pure art any way you want, including reaching a ton of people for that purpose. It's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to want to reach people and move people. Last thing I'll say about Rick before we move on, is I don't trust him, because he started his career making this commercial music, which is beautiful, and we all love it, and it's amazing. And I'm sure he has his own opinions of that work, but I think to say art is only pure, or meaningful if you make it only for yourself is hypocritical of him, because I think that he's made a lot of not just popular, but actually beautiful and meaningful work for many people. I think what he maybe is trying to say is that he wasn't fulfilled by the work, which is totally valid. And I think that all of us seek our own fulfillment in different parts of our life and existence. But
I absolutely love your perspective and would listen to however long that conversation was between you. And if that was 10 hours, I'd listen to the entire thing.
I'd love to talk to him. And I'm glad that he's on the planet. And I'm grateful that he is prompting some of these conversations.
I will say that my understanding of that was not that it was a hard and fast rule about art, but just that as you look at creative work, there's different elements of creative work.
Yeah.
Like what I took away from that was that I want to have a space where I create stuff that's not meant to be shared. And I have a space where I create stuff that is meant to be shared.
Yeah,
and those are actually two different things.
I love that.
And that is what I interpreted from, and I think that's also like the amazing thing about, someone who I took Rick's book as a question to myself. And I think also like timing, like when something hits you at the right time, it's
totally.
a completely different thing, Like I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said. And I think there were some offerings in that book that can be interpreted in so many, however you received that.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I think that was kind of what he wanted as well,
right?
Which I really respect. It's kind of like, in a sense, you offer yourself up to say, here's something, and react to it. And a lot of the book I really totally agree with as well. I think.
But you have to be you have to read it with an openness that we've been talking about this entire time.
Which I think,
curiosity.
all the three of us are creative people, I think, and so we know about the openness. I worry about people who don't know about the openness and who read it and think it's
and who are looking for guidelines.
Yeah,
I think though, to kick off creativity, you need some level of constraint.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
And I'm curious
something
about
to make friction against.
Yeah, because your openness is like I've watched some of your videos. You have 2 Tiny Desk concerts.
Yeah,
one is at the NPR like Tiny Desk set. The second one is at home. And I have to tell you that the first time I watched it, because like we put these on in our office, I didn't recognize that you were all the people. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it was just playing in the background, like,
right.
And then I watched it intentionally and I was like, how the hell did he do this? And like, you can kind of see there's a little bit of like imperfection in the mask, like your head, your hair is like tall, right? And it gets lost in the symbol.
The symbol, that was the hardest bit, the symbol masking.
And I was watching that and I was just like, there's a moment, and I know it's ridiculous to not know it was all you, because you do a bit after the first song, after All I Need, you do a bit where you're joking around that everyone's talking to each other.
Hey, well, that's my name.
Yeah. That video to me is like this It's amazing. Like I tried my whole life to explore and define creativity and what it means to me. But there's certain pieces of work that just hit me and go, God, I want to do something like that, you know? And that was the first one. The second one is somewhat similar, but the All I Need video you did during the pandemic on Jimmy Kimmel.
In the bathroom.
In the bathroom is like, there's moments where, I don't know if you ever feel like this, but you feel creatively jealous of something.
I know the feeling, yeah.
Yeah, where you're just like, and it's not even like, it's not jealousy in like, you could have even done it. It's just like, that person found something inside of themselves that is so them, and they were able to express it.
Yeah, I do know this feeling.
And
totally.
I was like, I just want to find that thing and be able to express that version of myself in a form like that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
That was deep, dark quarantine. And that was those two videos were made like 1 week after the other.
You can kind of feel the influence. Which one was first? The Tiny Desk?
The Tiny Desk was first.
You can feel the influence.
Yeah. It's a crazy thing to put together because, so that video took, I shot it in, I did no more than 2 takes for each instrument, but I planned it all in my head. And the thing that was crazy about it was, well, there were a few things that were hard about it. One is the thing of like, you know, when you see those videos of multiple people and you look at the screen next to you and it looks like you're just looking like away, but you're like, and it looks really weird. That's even more heightened in a space like that. So there's an art to being like, you're actually there. I'm going to look at you like you're actually there. But from a sheer logistical perspective, it was like, the other instruments weren't playing, and there was no click track.
Which one did you do first?
I did the piano first.
You did piano first.
Yeah, I did the piano first, and I had a machine underneath me where I was able to start and stop. I think I did like a count in for each song, so I knew like the tempo of the song.
Did you do that all by yourself? Like
I
there's
did.
no one else, and you're editing that by yourself.
I mixed. Yeah, I did everything myself.
The reason I ask that question is because I think that creative courage is a lot easier alone.
Interesting.
When you're in charge of the edit.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. I would say that is true in some respects. I think I actually sometimes find creative courage much easier when there's an audience because it's easy to make friction against something that is not me. The only judgment you ever really fear is your own, right? And so if you're by yourself and the only opinion available to you is your own, I personally can find that quite paralyzing sometimes, especially when it comes to starting an idea, which we discussed earlier on.
Yeah.
But I do think that you can take liberties to be whatever weird version of yourself on camera, knowing that it's in your hands to edit it at the end of the day is a very reassuring feeling. I loved that process so much. It was such an exciting moment to be like, okay, wide angle lens in the furthest corner of this tiny room. My room is probably slightly smaller than this room. It's like, it's small and it's packed full with instruments. So I had to like imagine like, if the elbow, you know what it's like, if the elbow goes over the line, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So you have to like,
screwed. Yeah.
And there was that thing you mentioned with the cymbal where I was, the lead Jacob was sitting on the floor cross-legged like this, playing the hang drum and there's a melodica solo. But I knew if I like put my head up, then my hair would go across the cymbal. And there were a couple of moments where I had to edge feather it. But I deeply enjoy editing, but like video editing. I edit all my own social media clips, like every one of them, like converting landscape to vertical and making cut downs and doing it. And I've always done it, so I don't question it. I also think that a lot of artists do it as well. And there's a huge gap in the world of the creative industries for people who want to edit videos and be creative and artists who desperately need that support. It's actually crazy. Like at some point, someone's gonna have to make a company that provides an amount of that for artists that everyone can be a part of. So it's almost like you need like a dating app for video editors and artists, because labels have a hard time providing. But
that's
this
a vulnerable relationship.
It is, and that's one of the reasons it's so hard.
Yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of really great editors over the years, but a lot of we mentioned trust before, like trust between the artist and audience, and you must feel the same thing. If someone else edited this podcast other than you guys, it's like not going to feel like Colin and Samir. And that relationship is it's like all the intangibles make such an impact. It's about humor, it's about detail, it's about sparkle and controlling energy. And it's about, in the same, it feels to me very similar to like, say writing an orchestration, like writing in the flute part and the bassoon part and all this stuff, and making sure that like when the energy goes down, there's something that keeps the energy up, or you're referring to previous things, like previous concepts covered. You're looping back. You're telling a story. Like that kind of storytelling is totally available as a video editor in the same way that it's available as a mixing engineer, or as a producer. I produce all my own albums as well, and it's the same kinds of storytelling of like, I love controlling those arcs and all those kinds of things. But I think what I have realized, come back to what you were saying, is that you can sometimes find a different kind of creative courage that can be extracted from you by what Steve Vai would call a cooperative component or a collaborator, basically. Someone who comes in and says, and it can get things out of you. I remember when we sat down to plan this conversation, one of the first things you said, which I loved, was we want to have a conversation with you that no one else would ever have with you. And that reminds me of something that my dear friend Chris Martin often says, which is, make music that only you could make. Yeah. And that's when you know that you're doing the right thing. And I think that's really, really important. And it's hard with all these different outlets that are expected of us as artists these days, whether it's video editing, mixing, production, live performance, style, interviews, all this stuff. It's like, and songwriting and playing an instrument, whatever it happens to be. It's like all these different hats that you wear, and the kind of expectation that you are literate and fluent in all these different areas. I feel like uniquely lucky to be self-sufficient, which I don't think is necessary to be creative, but I just happen to be very self-sufficient. And I'm grateful. I was intensely grateful for that in COVID, man, I got to say.
Yeah.
And I think that for creators around the world, it was either a very productive and lucrative time, or it was a very, very hard time. And for me, I think it was both. But I'm grateful for my skills in a variety of areas, and I don't take them for granted.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's common that an artist will edit their own video and then submit it to Kimmel.
Yeah.
Right? That they will handle that collaboration.
Yeah. Well, it was the same thing with Fallon. I did this video for Fallon, and that was a crazy shoot because they were moving cameras. It's one thing if there's a locked off shot and everything is in a mask zone.
Not the most recent.
Not the most recent Fallon performance. There's one from 2020.
Okay, that was like a pandemic one. Got it.
And it was we did All I Need, and so Mahalia sang the lead, and I played all the instruments, but we had to do a moving camera shot of Mahalia with me in the background on each instrument, and then a few wide shots where I would like automate a little bit of motion where there were the four Jacobs in the masked zone. Editing that was just it's so much fun, but it's a lot of time, and then it helps to be able to mix as well, because then you mix a little bit to the thing you're hearing, which helps you believe it, and all those little nuances. I love it. I love climbing into that part of the process. I really do.
I love so much that you're editing these videos. Like I would encourage,
comforting and inspiring.
Yeah,
that like someone with 6 Grammys.
Yeah,
is sitting there in a timeline.
Yeah,
like I am.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A Premiere timeline. I mean, every day I'm in Premiere editing something. I just did a Jimmy Kimmel for real this time in person. And, I posted a clip on my social media, which was a square crop of the landscape video. And I'm sitting there going through and cutting the shots when they change, which are outside of my control because it was the broadcast mix, cutting those shots, automating what's in the frame. And, like the video starts with, there's like a clip of me. The first thing you see is me being like this. And I found a head nod from a different part of the song, which I thought people would feel like that. I trust that's Jacob. And then there was a bit of Tori doing this, but I timed it so it was like she had just sung the phrase. And because I know that's how you start the video. I love all that stuff. I love the art form of it. But there are moments where I'm just like, man, there are so many things I need to do right now, and I'm editing in Premiere. And it's just. But I know a lot of artists that feel like that, whether they are in Premiere or whether they're just in Reels or Stories. There's a lot of pressure to make content right now, and there are gaps in the industry to support that.
So, with any creative endeavor, you've talked a lot about collaboration, and I want to get into collaboration. But before we get there, like your personal experience with creativity, if you can take us into your room. That feels like a very iconic room at this point. It is the room that you grew up in. It's the room that when we had our Zoom call to talk about the show, you were in that room. And that room is like just so iconic to me. But if you take us into that room when you're about to embark on a creative endeavor, whether it's writing a song or coming up with something, what is that process like for you? Like what is step one for your creative process?
Yeah. Well, I think that room knows me so well. Sometimes it's hard to hide from it. It's like I can't pretend in there at all. It's like that room has seen me in every state. Total flow, and like total despair. You know? So having a space as safe as that is really a privilege, because I'm able to go in there and I remember going there when I was 10 years old and closing the door and being like, this room has no walls. I can go anywhere from here. This is my spaceship, you know. Wow. I get to command the order. All right, where do we go today? You know, and that feeling, that it goes back to the thing of like, that's what you live for. I love that feeling so much of just being like, I'm here in this chair. What matters today? Where do we go today? You know. So in a sense, my job becomes, well, wherever I've created music, whether it's in that room or more recently I've created in various corners of the world and on stage and all sorts of things. But it's like, my job is actually to tune in to, I think about internal weather, something I think about a lot. Kind of like, you know, when you look out the window at the beginning of a day and you say, oh, today it's cloudy and there's kind of a breeze, but it's not too cold, but it's like it's a bit like looming. And there's just a feeling out here. There's a feeling out here. And it impacts you, and you make decisions. It's a bit like the surf. You think, oh, the surf is in these conditions today. How best do I approach this? How best do I catch a wave? Are there waves to catch today, or do I just need to have a rest? You know, are the waves so big that I gotta buckle up, or I gotta take more risks today to survive? You know, out there, or I'm gonna have to work pretty hard to catch a wave. The waves are pretty, like the tide's pretty low, or whatever. Like, I'm not really a surfer, but like one of my good friends is, and the way he talks about it is as such. But to me, when I create something, it's a bit like that. You have to court your state first. What's going on here? All right. So today I'm like easily, but in a sense, it's kind of like what turns you on today. Like what, because that's always going to be your primary flow. Like what's turning me on today? And sometimes it's like stuff that makes you laugh, or stuff that's super irreverent, stuff that's really angry, stuff that's like super, super quiet, or something that's so emotionally charged. In the same way that we diagnose, you know how when you were saying when you were young, you used to take long flights to India, 30-hour trips to India on planes, and you'd listen to CDs on those plane journeys. It's like the way you diagnose, what do I feel like listening to today? Oh man, Bon Iver, or Sufjan Stevens, or like Earth, Wind & Fire, you know, or like Metallica, whatever. Like that process, we all do it. And it's a creative process. It's a process of looking in and diagnosing how you feel and what's going to tug it out of you. And, you know, we all know the feeling of being a lot of us know the feeling of being really like in your feels, emotional. And then you listen to like Carrie and Lal by Sufjan Stevens or Bon Iver's first record, and you're like, there it is. I got it. You know? That's and it unravels. Yeah. Oh, that is exactly the same feeling as creating, but it's the opposite direction. So you're like, oh my God, there it is. There it is. Let me get it out. And that process is one of self-awareness, essentially. It's like knowing what's going to tickle you. Oh, I got it. I got one. You know, but you can't necessarily sit in silence and do that. You kind of have to do that in a process of flow. So sometimes it's about getting yourself moving. You know, you might start making something and then see what tickles you. So, you know, some days, like as someone who plays a few different instruments, what interests me sometimes is that there are just instruments on certain days that get me going and others that don't. So I might play piano one day and it's like, this isn't happening. But I might play bass and it's like, oh, I'm in the bass today. Or I want to be physical and play drums today, but like the guitar's not working at all, or whatever happens to be. And that can also guide your process. But at the end of the day, like the process where you talk about the gestation of an idea, it's about like making that mark and being comfortable with it. And sometimes, and often I would say that the best thing you can do for yourself is to get yourself out of your own way. So like one thing I sometimes do or recommend people to do is to like make the worst song in the world. Like make the worst song in the world. Yeah. Make something filthy bad that you would hate. And surprise yourself in the process of doing that at how interesting your song is, because you weren't afraid of making a bad song. Like you've opened the doors to all your unconscious ideas to wake up and contribute something because you're not afraid of making a bad song. And that's amazing. That's like an amazing feeling. If I sit down like, I gotta make a good song. I'm running out of time. You know, like as you were describing, that's not for me personally. That's not where the best ideas come from. And I think that there's just this kind of, there's like an openness that I cherish deeply when I'm able to find it, about letting myself, you know. So that's where it starts. If I can be open in that process, and I'm also like, I also think about water table. I think a lot about like weather. I don't know why. I've just realized, but like you know, water table, like the idea of like the average level of water. So it's like the emotional water table is interesting to me because, or creative water table. Some days you get turned on easily.
Yeah.
So like, or like, you get the giggles, like the tiniest thing will make you laugh. Or one scene like if you're on a plane, like one scene in a film and you're just floods of tears, Some days you're just up here and you're brimming up. And some days it's way down here and you're just like, I'm not easily stimulated today. And that's cool too. But it's always interesting. And the challenge is, where do I meet myself today without trying to change myself? I don't have to bully myself into blah, blah, blah. Where do I meet myself today? And no matter who I am today, there will be something of value that I have to say.
I think there's
Would you say lyrics fit into that same process and methodology? Because I would imagine you have to be a little bit more deliberate about words that go down on a page.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I would almost say that the same is true with lyrics. If I overthink what my song is about before I've written it, it never ever comes out. So like one thing I always recommend to any creative person who is making something is like, you've got to embrace the nonsense, right? You've got to embrace things that make no sense. Nonsense is super underrated, and like David Byrne is one of my favorite musicians in the world. A lot of his songs make an abstract sense, stop making sense, literally. Like he stands for that. Or like Spike Milligan, who's an amazing poet from England. He wrote amazing like nonsense poetry, and it's like this idea that you combine words together that don't go together, but they're still meaningful. That's like a huge part of my language is things that don't make sense. And so if I'm too deliberate about trying to make sense or have a reason, or if I'm too deliberate about trying to make no sense, like agendas don't help me with lyrics. But lyrics is another instrument to play. It's in the same way that you might play the piano or you might play the guitar. Sometimes I might start writing, and I write avidly. I write all the time, constantly writing. It's one of the greatest ways for me to process and create with my life and collage my life. But sometimes I'm right and I'm like, whoosh, and the wheel starts turning and you float. Oh, it's an amazing feeling. Sometimes you write and you think, now I'm just pissing myself off. I'm going to do something else today. And another thing I think is underrated is not pushing yourself to make something if you're not in the mood. Like sometimes you're not in the mood. It's okay to say, I'm giving up today. I'll come back tomorrow. Staying there and trying to make it work when you're not in the mood doesn't always work. Sure, sometimes you can persevere and push through it and whatever. But I think that's more helpful for me in life when it comes to things that aren't about creativity. When it's about like routine or like I always forget to eat. So it's like, I got to eat, man. You got to eat always, constantly. Like I'm getting hungry. I got to eat. And my mom was always like, eat, Jacob. So like there are some things in life where routine and being unbending is like really helpful. But in creativity, again, many, many ways of doing everything. There's no one state. Discipline and stuff works for some people. Creativity, it's never worked for me. Like the art of it is finding my way into being deeply interested by something so it seizes me. And once it's got me and I've got it, then you just roll, and it's a glorious feeling.
I actually think your connection to the weather is what I think makes you a great collaborator. Like what you just brought up with the weather, because I think the weather is you have no control over it.
That's his magic.
And
that's his magic. Yeah.
You look at it and you walk outside, and it is what it is. That is the reality.
Yes, exactly.
But you are now forced to work within those new confines, that new reality. And everything you've talked about in the last couple hours that we've been sitting here has to do with your openness and your willingness to be curious and then work within the new form that has emerged, right? And I think I love what you said about courting yourself as the first thing, because you're essentially curious, how do I feel today? Yeah. What is that? Okay, now I'll work within those bounds.
Well, in the same way that every great conversation, I mean, you must have so many thoughts on this, but comes about in that way. It starts with being curious, and not necessarily having a plan, but sort of thinking like there are places that we can meet today. But I think one of the greatest things, as we said earlier about the creative process, is this is outside my control, but let's rock with it. Yeah. And let's find a way to something that feels good.
The rigidity is what can create discomfort and sometimes unnecessary friction. Like, we found this relationship with conversation and collaboration to be us having to develop a relationship with control and preparation. Yeah. Where we can come in really prepared. We're like, this is what would make the flow of this conversation really great. Yeah. But then we have to sit here and experience it. And you might say something that takes us off that track. And then we have to go, is that okay?
Sure.
Now we're over here.
Let's
That's
go with
fine.
that.
Let's go there, right? But in the beginning, when we started the show, it was like you would be saying that, but all I would be thinking would be, how do I get
to
you,
the next? How do I get
you
to my point?
back to the point? That rigidity. My wife brought it up to me. She's a therapist, so she's like someone who has to do like experience conversation in a very open way.
Yeah.
But she was like, "You're not listening." She'd listen to the show and be like, "You're not listening.
That's amazing.
Thinking and trying to control it."
Which is natural.
Which is the natural state. But I think, like, I would assume, you know, I mentioned to you, I listened to the new album 3 times through, right? Like Djesse Volume 4. It's fantastic. The thing that sticks out is like the types of collaborations on there.
Yeah.
Some of which are unexpected, some of which are, you know, genre changes, some of which are completely different from the song previous.
Yes.
And that, to me, you know, when he goes, you know, John Mayer, John Legend, Chris Martin, Shawn Mendes, Stormzy, like these people who want to come in and collaborate with you, I'd imagine it's that experience of they get to show up as they are and you accept them like the weather.
I love that. I love that. That's beautifully put. And I think that's my job. That is my job as the producer, as the songwriter, and as their friend at the end of the day. And I think one thing I'm very grateful for with this album, you know, there are 150,000 people on the album, if you count all the audience members, but in terms of collaborations, there were 30 collaborations, 40 collaborations or so. And they're all a fresh start. And I've gradually learned exactly what you've learned over the years with collaboration, where my first attempts were kind of like, hey, how you doing? I've got a really clear idea of what I want to get from this session.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you listen to the results and it's like, yeah, kind of. And then, you know, then there are sessions like, for example, you mentioned the John Mayer song. I wrote the song with my good friend Lizzie McAlpine, and we didn't really have a plan. I had a little seed that we began the song with, and it follows itself, into where it needs to go. I have a little mantra sometimes which I say to myself, which is, don't try to understand it, follow it. Right?
Love that.
And it's a fun thing to cultivate in a collaborative session, because your job is to follow each other. And exactly as you say, it's like it's like the weather in the sense that there's like unconditional elements to this that will exist no matter what you do for them. And kind of your only job is to show up for what's already there and make space for that. And there's something that I think Michelangelo used to say, which is about sculpting. It's about you remove what's not the sculpture from the block. Say there's a block. You remove what's not the sculpture and reveal what was already there as the sculpture.
I love that.
Which reminds me a lot of there's this philosophy in traditional Chinese medicine about there's a lot about yin and yang, right? And we have a lot of yang in our culture right now. It's like you add the thing, you know, yang being sort of like the outward, the masculine, whatever.
Yeah.
Yin being the inner, the thing that is within. So yang is white and yin is black, you could say, because yang is the presence of and yin is the absence of. But there's this idea about when language first came to be in the world, the first evidence of language was people sculpting out of stone, and the light would shine, and the shadow of the chalice that you created would be that's what's there. That's the text. You've removed something to reveal something. So it's like the absence of something is itself the meaning. And I think that's so beautiful and so amazing to remember. And I often think about it within collaboration, in the sense that everything we need is already here. It's like this idea of abundance, you know? Everything we need is already here. Our job is to remove the things that aren't helpful so we can see the thing that's here, and then find that sense of flow. But I think it's an amazing thing to remember. We think of it as like, I am writing with black ink on my white page and adding the meaning. But that's all that is a visual imitation of what used to be removing something from the page to reveal the meaning. I think that's beautiful.
That is beautiful. I love that.
I'm curious what Djesse Volume 4 represents for you in your career, because there was an interesting quote I read from you that reads, "By the end of 4 volumes, I could start my career properly."
Yeah. That was my original intention with Djesse. Yeah.
So that was before even beginning the series.
I wanted to learn from all my favorite musicians. I wanted to work with them and see what happened. And I knew that by the end I would have learned some stuff. And I have learned so much. But I think with Volume 4, I left it open. I kind of planned 1, 2, and 3 kind of. I knew the worlds they were going to live in. I knew that Volume 1 was going to be this big orchestral space, like a big acoustic world, like the morning, the sun rising, whoosh, the feeling of it I knew. Volume 2 I knew would be like a cozier, more folky sort of small acoustic space, a more intimate, I knew that volume 3 would be like the nighttime, if it kind of goes around, kind of almost like it goes around a day. It's kind of like the volume 1 is the morning opening, volume 2 is the evening quieting, volume 3 is the fever dream of the night, and volume 4 is like question mark, question mark, question mark, what am I going to feel like doing then? And it was a hard album to make. It was so hard to make volume 4. It was the hardest album I've ever had to make because there were no constraints, as you were saying. Yeah. It was you do everything and anything all at once, kind of. And so was
there a time constraint?
No,
like,
that was the other thing.
Label doesn't pressure you to
no,
be like,
they can't tell me shit. So it was literally you do whatever you want to do, Jacob. And it was like I was sitting in my own kind of like dream/nightmare of how does it feel now? Do whatever you want.
Yeah. You got what you want, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that process for me was tough. And I wrote a lot of songs. I wrote so many songs that were me trying to find the songs on the album that eventually made the album. And it took a long time to come to fruit. But I think at this point, there was a moment where I realized what the album was about. And the thing that did it for me, the thing that made me realize what it was about was going on tour after COVID, which I think was a huge moment for a lot of artists who hadn't been able to tour for a long time. And I learned a lot of things over COVID. One of them was how much I freaking love touring. And I hadn't realized it until that happened. It was like, this is a huge part of my life that I'm lacking in right now. When I came back to touring, this idea of the audience choir, the idea of, a venue of people singing as one animal, it just kind of from the first show of the tour, it just exploded for me. Like my ideas for it were so massive. And I'd thought a bit about it over COVID, but I hadn't really, you can only practice that skill when you're on stage with an audience. You can't warm up or plan. Yeah. You have to just do it 100 times, which I did 100 times in 2022. And we recorded every single show because the audience choirs were getting so moving and so profound and so good that my whole, like the rudder of my boat was turning in a direction of like, not just musically, but philosophically for me. Why am I here? What's me at my best? What's me at my biggest and most giving, at my most connected? And it was like, a lot of it was changing with the idea that the audience choir was happening. And it was happening by itself. I wasn't trying to drive it. I didn't have an agenda for it. I was just like, I love this so much. And what happens if you like all the best ideas, what happens if you just all went up and now you went down again, and now you went down. So, okay, so if whoa. And then, you build these sequences of chords and you move through. So I developed a lot of techniques over that year that helped be really clear about what I wanted. Like with all of us, we were saying about family earlier on, my first musical memories were of watching my mother conduct an orchestra, right? I would sit sometimes on her lap, but also in the audience and watch her go, and then the music would go, and it's a feeling that you remember in your body. You remember the feeling of being in that room and how it's like casting a spell watching my mom conduct. And it goes, and then the room wakes up and she's commanding not just notes and time, but she's commanding permission. She's saying, pull, push. She's commanding energy. She's commanding humor. She's commanding all these different things. And sure enough, I was like, I'm not going to be a conductor. I don't know what conducting. And then I accidentally become this conductor of audiences, and I just love it so much, so much so that I went home and I was like, I want the record to feel like this. I want the album to feel like I'm on stage conducting an audience because I always knew I wanted to collaborate, but I didn't see this coming. I knew I wanted to work with all my heroes, but I didn't think I'd have a choir of 100,000 on the record until suddenly it was like, obviously, I'm going to put a choir of 100,000 people on this record. This is what this record is for. And it became just crystalline at that moment. It became clear. So once I figured that out, I realized, well, what's this album about fundamentally? It's almost like, what's my thesis? What have I learned in my extending of, it's like I asked a question of the universe. I want to learn about music. I want to learn about life. I want to leave my room. I want to explore the big wide world. I want to be challenged. I want to take risks. I want to stretch myself. I want to learn. I want to build bridges between genres. I want to build bridges between fan bases. I want to travel the globe. I want to absorb all this stuff. And, like all the best answers the universe gives, it came in a way I wasn't expecting. And it was like, here is a language that I get to build and evolve based in group psychology and musicality and permission, but fundamentally based in the human voice. So I would say the album's about the human voice, which is where I began my journey. And again, I realized this. It's like my first YouTube video was me, 4 of me, and then it became 6 of me trying to do that thing, you know, trying to be the world singing in harmony. But it was just me. And I sang the bass and the alto and the, all this stuff, and build up these harmonies. And I was getting at the same thing. I was pulling on the same thread, but it took 10 years for me to realize this is my voice. It's the voice of others. It's when I can offer whatever courage I have to you to use your voice. That's me. That's me speaking. That's me singing, you know? And so now I feel like I'm playing the whole world as a musical instrument. And that feels so amazing. And that's what the album is about for me. It's about the way I've learned to absorb and be challenged by, and it's like surfing. It's like going back to the surfing the wave. It's like you pull from the world, you ride the world. And it's a beautiful thing to feel like that moment of the show for me is I'm at my mutest in a sense. Like I'm not singing. I'm in silence. I never say a word. That's the one rule with audience choir. I never explain it. I never say, you guys sing this? Okay, so when I go with my hands up, then you guys go. No, I just stand there on stage and I go, ooh. And it goes, ooh. And it's an amazing feeling. And it's extraordinary for that to feel like the moment for me, honestly, when my voice is at its loudest is when I'm not saying a word. And I think there's just a lot of ways in which that's impacted my life as a person and the way I think about purpose, the way I think about collaboration. Everything's changed because of that.
I do think that's beautiful. I think the gift of permission is a beautiful gift for a creative to give.
Yes.
And I think it's the gift that I crave to give the most. And I think what we try and find through this show is like, you know, you hear Jacob Collier's story and there's something that you connect with and it gives you permission to pursue the thing that to press publish on the video that you did 10 years ago. What is that version for you? What is posting that for you? What is
exactly,
you know, like I think that the gift of permission, it's amazing how much we require it as humans, right?
It is. It's astonishing and how far it can go when you give it.
It's probably the conditioning of just, we were always in permission-based environments, right? You have something to say, you raise your hand.
Oh yeah, you have to. Well, it's like the default is that you're unqualified. Before you become qualified.
And then as you grow up, those environments don't exist anymore. I guess they do in like traditional jobs where you do need permission to do things. But I guess that's like our relationship with permission is very fascinating. As
it's extraordinary.
You talk about wild and tame. Permission is what tames us, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the need for it.
Yeah. Well, I would almost say permission is what allows us to feel truly wild and safe.
Right.
That's the thing. I think I feel tame when I feel like I have the least permission, because I get in and I get into my thing of like, I know I need to control this. I need to control this. I need to have my lines and I need to have my systems and all this kind of stuff. And I get smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's a version of, you know, control and things that is actually healthy and is about sourcing like your materials. But a lot of the axis of wild to tame, for me, permission is about saying, it's okay to be wild. And that's what I needed to hear as a child.
But people require that permission.
I think so. All of us do.
You need to put yourself in environments that is possible, I think.
And the best way of cultivating those environments is to give permission to others.
Yes, I agree.
Because you get it straight back.
Beautiful gift.
Yeah.
I think that's why audience choir is such an emotional experience. Even just watching, I get the chills and I'm on the verge sometimes of tears watching. And I think it is that transfer of permission of like, be wild, be free, but also be a part of this together in this moment.
And trust each other.
And and I assume that's what it is, because I watch the videos and I hope to experience it in person one day. But I watch the videos and I do get emotional, and I've been asking myself why. What is it about this thing?
It's a very emotional experience.
That is not language. It's not like I'm watching a movie and seeing a scene on an airplane that connects with me. It's just this thing that's happening. And yet I'm on the verge of tears.
I think some of the most beautiful things in life are when there aren't the words for it. The more words you use to explain something, sometimes the further you get away from it. But the audience choir is beautiful from my perspective. I have the best seat in the house every night. I'm in front of the whole, I can hear everyone like this. And I get to sit and design a journey through these things. And it's about mass permission. And I feel I remember a really good friend of mine came to a show in Norway, and it was a crazy show. We played a show in Oslo in 2022. And my friend Stian, who came to play a couple of songs in the show, he said, I could have walked out of that venue and I could have given anyone a hug in that audience.
That's beautiful.
Hey man, we just did that together. You know? That makes me emotional.
Those communal experiences.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about collaboration on the show and where you are today with Djesse Volume 4 and the audience choir and where your career is today. It's interesting as your career started in this space of, kind of rearranging or covering other people's work.
Yeah.
And I find that to be really interesting, like your relationship with remixing and collaborating with previous work. And I'm curious if you could speak a bit to that, the nature of, what was it about hearing someone else's work and then wanting to play with that? And I ask that because I think today there's a lot of curiosity from creatives around originality.
Yeah.
Especially you come to a YouTube or a TikTok and it's like, here's a trend or here's a thing that's happening. I'm essentially going to like cover that thing, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to do that thing.
Put my own spin on it.
And sometimes put your own spin on it. Sometimes do it, pretty closely.
Verbatim, yeah.
And that's looked down upon obviously in creativity, but putting a spin on it and making it your own and remixing it, that is oftentimes the way that the most talented creatives get started.
Well, think about how we learn language as kids, right? We learn language by being surrounded by masters of it, having total permission to play around, have our mistakes celebrated or even enjoyed. Oh my God, you said, and then fashioning together like all these different ways of using language that help us express how we feel. I think you in that environment, it's you begin by imitating others, and then you begin by interpreting others, and then eventually you get to the point where you think, I have something to say here that no one else has said, and that it kind of must be that order. You can't come at something necessarily and just cut to the bit where you can do whatever you want, but in my experience and many people's experience, I think that it's important to kind of go through that trajectory. So in terms of music, learning other people's songs is a great first step for getting started. You think, I love this song. How does it work? And you pose the question, you sit down, you figure out how it works, and it's a joy. And then the second phase of that is, like how would I say it if I were to say this? How would I play this? What's my spin on this? I think that's inherently for me. That's always been there for me. I can't not do it in my own way. Even if I really try and do it like someone else, I always end up slightly doing it in my own twist, whether it's like music or elsewhere. But it's a safe place to explore someone else's song because you don't have to. It's a bit like carving into a stone. You don't have to build a stone yourself and then start carving it. It's like, I built the stone. What is that? It's like, here's a stone that is so safe and I would gravitate towards songs that felt really solid and in their identity and really kind of resilient, because my interpretations were very hardcore. Like I would stretch songs into like oblivion of like what put them together, like total reharmonization, total recontextualization in terms of time, sound, everything, structure. And so, a song like Don't You Worry About a Thing or Fascinating Rhythm, or these songs I covered back in the day, like they're really repetitive and strong and everyone knows them. The other thing I loved about arranging, which I still love about arranging, is that you get to more directly attend to somebody's expectation. If you know the song Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and I play Twinkle Little Star, but at the last minute, I switch up the chord and I do something unexpected, you get tickled by it in a way that I can't tickle you if it's an original song.
That's so true.
So I was able to like safely experiment with surprise and pulling around, like designing these journeys, and I tickled a lot of people because people were like, "Whoa, and it's like it's like when you look at a painting or a piece of art by someone like Escher, right? Where it's about modulation of perspective. You can look at it from here, or like that optical illusion where you see the old woman and the young girl at the same time. You know that one? It's like it's pivoting someone's psychology. It's like, here's something you know, and here's another thing that you know, and I'm going to change the first thing to be this. This is maybe it's like there needs to be a crossover point where, like say I'm doing three. If I'm doing 3 in my left hand and 4 in my right hand, right? Or maybe it's better if I do this. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? The first thing I might do is I might go 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I can get into that. Yeah, 1. Okay, I understand what you're saying. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. I'm still kind of feeling in 3. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And then this. If I stop the 3, then suddenly, like there was a bridge to get to the 4. And I'm here now, right? So essentially, it's like building a bridge from one kind of time to another kind of time. You can do this in many, many ways.
I was not ready for that to stop.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, but essentially, what you do is you state something, you state another thing that has overlap, and then you remove the first thing and you can build to another thing. That's what happens with expectation when you arrange a song. Is you say, here's a melody that you know, and I'm going to do it 3 times, and the 4th time I do it, I'm going to change the direction, but it's not going to feel like a smack in the face because there's an expectation of
familiarity.
So because it's familiar, but without setting up what is first familiar, you can't do something that's unexpected, and you can't create that like inner laugh of like, which I just love that feeling so much, and I would constantly seek it in my own experiments. And actually, I had a hard time writing songs for a while at the beginning of my career because I felt so deeply safe in arranging other people's music that it was like, if I have to write the song as well, that's like, then what am I going to apply my skill set to? I feel like I'm an arranger. I feel like I'm someone who can take apart something, put it back together, and it takes a completely different set of skills to write a song than it does to arrange a song. But then the joy is when you write a song, then you get to arrange it, and you get to use all of your powers to build things, and it's an interesting way in.
You do have these magical powers though with the way that you put together sound. That today I'm sitting in a coffee shop this morning doing some writing and listening to Djesse Volume 4, and I was listening to it intently, and then I could not help but move and bounce sitting in this crowded coffee shop. I was just like,
oh, cool.
I was like, oh my God, I just can't help it.
Right.
There's something about the way that you put together sound that I don't know what it is, but it feels very different. I don't know what it is. It almost speaks more to the intuitive nature of like movement.
Yeah. Well, I have to, if I'm moving, making it, then I know I'm doing something right. Right? You follow what makes you jiggle. You're like, okay, I'll do more of that.
Yeah.
I'm doing more of that. You know what I mean?
And I think
it feels like you're like crossing a river, jumping on stones, but like to a rhythm of like, there.
Whoa,
now I'm there, and up, I'm across.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
I think we resist the fluidity of that though as humans, and like sometimes there's things that are unexplainable. I think the best art and the best creativity cannot be explained. It's like I hear this thing and it makes me want to move.
Why? Who knows?
I don't know. Why does that sound
I don't need
that
to know.
way? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the best art reflects life, and art and life always takes us by surprise. It will always come at us sideways. And when I hear a song, it's like, that's how it feels when I'm crossing a river, or that's how it feels when I'm doing whatever. It's like, I know that feeling. I'm going to follow that feeling. And as artists, we do get to draw these amazing lines of intention and remind people how it feels to be alive.
Yes.
And I know that when I make something that is meaningful to me, I'm reminded of feeling the most alive. It makes me feel the most alive I ever feel,
What about how does the world change now as we briefly touched on it, but as AI becomes a collaborator to creatives?
Yeah.
Obviously in music, it feels like it's become more significant than in other places. It's shown up a lot in music.
It's more of an antagonist, I think, in music.
Yeah, it's all in how we perceive it. Going back to what we were saying before, you make the world. Yes, AI is terrifying. Yes, AI is beautiful. You figure it out. I understand why people are afraid. I understand that. I think that there are. You look at it from a distance and you see this is threatening this and threatening this and threatening this. But my first intuition as a creative person, whenever I see anything in life, whether it's good, bad, ugly, big, small, whatever, it's like, whoa, interesting, And I think that I know that's my true nature speaking. So I'm deeply fascinated by all of what AI is offering the creative space. I think there are ways in which we can create things that we could never have imagined possible using it. That excites me a huge amount. Say, for example, there was a way to prompt a sound that you couldn't build by hand. So like the sound of like what's an interesting sound? Like an ice ore shattering by hitting it at the bottom of a lake. Like that's a sound I would crave hearing. Or like, reverse paint. Or something. Or kind of like a horse doing a backflip on soil. Like these are the kinds of sounds that I dream up, and I'm like, how do I make that? I don't know. I'm so excited for a world where you get to design the world. You get to build a world. And I've seen some tech that thrills me.
Every musician says this. Like, I feel like you guys have access.
Musicians have access to stuff.
We talk to some musicians who are like, listen, the things I've seen.
You
wouldn't understand. It's like, what about us video creators? Why don't we get access to seeing these things? Like, it does feel like the music industry is treating AI very differently right now.
It's funny. And there are the gatekeepers and all sorts of stuff. I think a lot of the challenge is actually how it's communicated in the world. If it's communicated as like, hey, here's AI and it's a huge threat to all of you, like be very afraid, which is a lot of the media around it, then people are very afraid.
The fear is has more tension and attention to it than
fear's more magnetic.
Yeah, it's more magnetic.
Gets the brain moving and stuff. But I think one thing I think is very important is that we remember the cruciality of like irreverence, I suppose you could say, or even disobedience. Like what terrifies me about AI is its obedience. And I spent a lot of hours, whether it's generating images or trying to generate sounds or whatever, or stories, text, of trying to get it to misbehave, trying to get it to, and I think a lot of us have. It's like bullying it to being interesting, basically.
I'm just thinking about your TikTok where it like zooms out and
film. I love that so much.
Jacked.
I love that. Yeah. Got so many comments like, bro, I had no idea, bro. That's crazy, bro. Bro's hit the like, wow. This is the world we live in now.
That's the world we live in.
You believe whatever you see.
Yeah.
But yeah, the art of I mean, maybe bullying is the wrong word, but like bullying something into being interesting or being strange. It was much easier in the early days of image generation, for example. DALL-E 1 and 2 and stuff were like so weird.
Yeah.
And you would ask it to make things and it would make a weird like version of a thing. And I remember asking it to do, like you just like, draw me a picture of the feeling of escaping a garden by torchlight. Right,
that's the most Jacob Collier prompt I've ever.
And then it would draw me like this weird smeared image of like torch. It was like it didn't draw me a picture of a torch. It drew me a picture of torchness.
Whoa. Yeah,
that thrilled me so much.
Yeah.
And the first time I used DALL-E, I used it for like hours and hours and hours, and then I had like the craziest dreams I've ever had because my brain was able to access. It was like there's no gap between your idea and then the actualization of your idea, and we're gonna have to get used to that because it's a bit of a whiplash moment for creatives to be like, what if you remove any need for you to execute this and all you have to care about is the idea? What does that environment look like? What does that creative wow, And not only that, but what happens when spectacular becomes ordinary and everything is spectacular and you can be spectacular with ease? Scenic image of poof, wow, amazing, so superb, clean.
Ordinary becomes spectacular, right?
I would say so. I would say the parts of the human condition that we're going to lean into and that are going to give us the most connective force in the world are all those are things like this.
Yeah.
Strange bangs that you can't explain.
Yeah.
Imperfect things that happen and the things that keep us up at night and the things that turn us on. I think about that a lot. It's like AI can't do that stuff for us.
I think about the premise of like how AI has become this almost like very efficient way to operate in some ways, right? Like when we think about brainstorming and we come up with a YouTube title, and we want 10 variations of that title. The most efficient way to get 10 variations is actually to pop it into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I thought about this when I went to the John Mayer show here in LA where he played acoustic. And I was there and I was like, the most efficient way for me to listen to these John Mayer songs is by selecting them myself in a Spotify playlist and listening to them.
Yeah.
But what I'm here for is the inefficiency of it. The friction of showing up and having to park and walking in with a crowd of people and the collectiveness
smelling
of that,
smelling
the venue. And also like the fact that he's going to start playing Neon by riffing for, 35 seconds or 60 seconds before he starts the riff.
Yeah.
And that's an inefficient way to listen to Neon.
Well, I love your use of the word efficiency, and I think there's a huge myth that efficiently is better than.
Yeah.
But I also think that you can be efficient. I guess it just depends on what your priorities are, because it can be more creatively efficient to go around the houses.
Sure.
If your priority is to gather more materials, for example. But I do think, I lament the psychology that the fastest way is best. Because I just know I know it so deeply in me that sometimes the long way, the long way home is more efficient or more more meaningful than the short way home. But it's so tempting to pull the fruit that's hanging really low and say, I'm just gonna do this. But I think these are the questions that will need to pervade our creative processes, but also our education. And I think that I was talking to a friend about this last night, actually. It's like, what happens when we remove the need to, what if information is so accessible to us that we can find it anywhere in the world at all times, then what do we train for? Do we train to memorize a bunch of information, or do we train to have empathy? Or do we train to be irreverent? Do we train to surprise each other? Do we train to give each other permission, to have courage? Do we train to be resilient to life and the unpredictability of life? Yes, is my answer to that. I think those are the lessons that we need to learn, because then the information that is rife and only getting rifer in the world, and our access to information which is only growing, that all becomes part and parcel with who we are as people. And the human condition is about that. It's about listening. It's about observing. It's funny, I was talking to Herbie about AI for a long time yesterday. He's so interesting on it, obviously. And he was saying how, whenever he asks Alexa for something, he always says like, please and thank you. And how we need to treat AI like it's like a stroppy teenager. It's like figuring it out. It's figuring out how to be a good person.
Yeah.
But if we are not kind and gentle to it, then we are failing as parents. Like, it's looking to us. It's like, what do we do?
Yeah.
It'll give us what we give them.
Yeah. Literally, it's like a supercharged kid who's learning at accelerated, so approaching quantum speeds. But it's the same principles. It's like, I was just like really touched when he said that. It's like, I always say thank you. It's like, Alexa, if you wouldn't mind, please, could you play this, whatever. But I think it is about that, and I think it does reproduce the forces that are given to it. And I think that, what Herbie said is that's going to save humankind. Us realizing that AI will remove the parts of our learning that are not empathy, and focusing on empathy and deepening our understanding of each other and our connections with each other. That's what's going to save us. And because otherwise, what is there to live for?
It does force us to reconcile with what is uniquely human.
Yeah. Right. And what matters.
And what matters.
And being perfect is not interesting.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with AI. It's not that I'm threatened. It's, oh my God, AI is gonna take away my job personally. But I worry about a world where things aren't interesting. But I am excited at the thought, going back to what I was saying before, where creators and artists are going to want to and need to ask the right questions to get results. And that skill of asking a good question is a really great skill to have, no matter who you are and what you make. It's the skill of saying, it's the skill of knowing what you want, really, and knowing what you like, and it's a new frontier for people with taste, because when you can prompt a world into existence, it's just an accelerated version of what you do over the course of your life, which is you manifest things that matter to you, and then the questions are even more important, which is, so what does matter to you? If you remove any obstacles, what matters to you? And in a weird way, I would almost say like my career feels a bit like that right now, because a lot of the obstacles have been removed. I feel like there's so much that's possible in every direction that the question doesn't become, what if I could do this? Because the answer is yes. The answer is what it matters to do, what matters to make. With the time I have on this planet, what matters? And so in a weird synchronicity, I feel like the creative process and my personal area is becoming, that's the question that keeps coming up to me. It's kind of like you literally get to decide. Nothing matters unless you decide it matters. Anything can matter to you, but you should sit down and look within, and as Michelangelo would say, sculpt away the parts of yourself that you don't need to reveal what matters. And making a life, not a living, in the words of Quincy, is a beautiful way to carve a purpose. And and sourcing that
Making
feels
a
like
life
good
worth
advice.
living.
yeah.
Especially for someone in a position like yours, and like a lot of artists find them when they have opportunity overload, when you're fortunate to get to that space
Yeah.
where you can go any direction.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, exactly. The question becomes, what's important, and how do I keep learning? The thing that the worst result is that I stop. Is that I believe I'm one thing, and that stops changing. Is that I believe it's like this is what I am, and I define it too clearly that I stop evolving. That would be the only shame. Everything else is just me progressing and figuring it out, like we all are doing.
Can I ask your current relationship with like YouTube, TikTok? Like, what are you consuming? Like, what are your inputs?
So it's a great question. I would say I watch a lot of YouTube, partly because I'm YouTube Gen. Like that was my home, and I trust it in a sense. I would say I think of my primary output as a combination of Instagram and YouTube. I think of YouTube as the kind of like the sort of archive of the most of the catalog of content. Though I'm enjoying the kind of like the era of YouTube Shorts and like roughing that up a bit and being like, just throw something on YouTube, it's fine.
Yeah.
I actually think DSPs are moving that direction too, Spotify and things like that. Just release it, it's fine.
Yeah, true.
And we're removing the cobwebs of kind of like, it has to be perfect, it has to be. If I'm going to put it on Spotify, it's like, just put it up. But I think of YouTube as the kind of like the primary archive of like, the pieces of work I've really worked hard on, like my albums, my videos and things like that. And Instagram feels like the place where I have the highest engagement of people who are interested in my antics for whatever reason. And so, I consume both of those two. I think it's because it's where I find my people the easiest.
Is it like music stuff, or is it like, do you like watch like a enchilada recipe or something? Like, what do you get into on YouTube?
You get into all sorts of weird and wacko. Like you go down like a fractals YouTube rabbit hole, and then you start watching a bunch of Fourier transform, and then you watch it. Then it's the harmonic series, and I don't know. I think as someone who's interested in stuff, it's cool. It's cool to be able to deep dive. And I felt like this when I was 13. YouTube was brand new, and I was able to dig up some treasure of like, whoa, I've never seen that before. I treat YouTube as a search engine more than I click all the algorithmic video personally, but just because I'm quite discerning about what I want to see. And obviously everyone goes down the thing and you learn, but I love throwing something at YouTube and seeing what comes back. And yeah, I mean Instagram's is cool. I mean they all have their shortcomings.
Do you have a perspective on what took place with UMG and TikTok and sort of what that does to either the artists or the music industry?
It's so interesting. It's such an interesting moment. I'm always going to side with creatives, and I don't necessarily think that's a separate conversation from siding with TikTok or UMG. I think they both are trying to do the right thing and failing in some ways. Like I don't think it really helps artists to remove music from UMG. But I get that they're trying. I get that they're trying to help, and I don't know. To me, I just think that it's important that creators can always feel like they have access to their fans. And if you put heart and soul and work into something, that should A, be available for your fans to find, and B, remunerated in a way that is sound and makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, people got to figure it out. I'm glad there's a conversation happening. I'm saying, in a world where there's a lot of opacity between these big organizations, I'm glad that someone's gone out on a limb and said, I don't know about this. And then now people are figuring it out. And like, that's healthy. That's good. And I do hope that I hope that artists for whom there are already so many roadblocks, I hope that there aren't artists for whom access is removed. That's not going to help. That's not going to help anybody. And, I think my personal relationship with value is different from other artists. I don't value money as more important than impact, in a sense, like kind of like sharing my ideas. Sure. I'd much rather share ideas, have someone take an idea of mine and run with it. That feels expensive, that feels like currency to me.
Yeah.
Like if I could make a bunch of money, like great, what am I going to do with it? Like make cool stuff, I suppose. I'm fortunate to be in a position where I tend to have enough money to make the things I want to make, and it's taken a decade into my career to do that. But I've never made decisions based on money. And I could have, if I wanted to make money, I would have had a different career. That's the truth. I could have done it, but I don't measure. For myself, I don't measure money as important in the equation. As long as I can make the work I want to make. And I acknowledge that I'm in a privileged position on that. And part of that's like living at home, always having living at home. And I can always make things without having to pay a bunch of rent and things. But I look at the equation and I just think like, yes, remunerate artists, of course, like 100%. But also don't remove the artist's ability to communicate, which is their primary function in this world for the good of the world. Don't remove that for some kind of financial gain. And be honest when you state things like this, because you also want to make a bunch of money, UMG, from this, you know? And so it's just let's all like grow up and just look at what's going on here and acknowledge that there's a lot of moving parts. But overarching, I'd say I side with the creatives always. And I'm glad there's a conversation happening.
Where does your sense of style come from?
Oh no, it's a disaster. I don't think it that much about style. I think it's not deliberate. I genuinely just am extremely drawn to color and pattern. I love it. And it makes me happy. And I've always been like that. And so,
it's really cool.
And I also like comfort. Like this is super comfy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm a bendy, agile human who likes to run around a lot and change shape. And so I like wearing clothes that I can do that in.
You wear certain patterns. So what I'm wearing right now is actually my family's clothing line. My father has been a designer since the 70s.
I really love it.
But the first time I met you, I was just like, man, my dad would love you. Like my dad would just like, my dad is so deeply connected to colors and patterns.
Yeah.
And like, he just can't help himself. You know, like when he shows up in the world, he just can't help himself.
Yeah.
And there's something too, like my brother and I always talk about it. It's just like, he has this like visceral reaction. If we're traveling through Mexico or something and he sees a pattern, it's like, he just has to go towards it. It's such a fascinating, I don't know, creative trait.
It is. It's an interesting one. I feel the same way. It's like, you know, if I see a building or a person or a piece of clothing or anything, I'm like, what? I love that. I love that so much. And in a sense, it's like those things that you can't control that end up driving you.
Right.
I can't control it. I just love it so much. You know, I love it.
You.
It's just me.
Man, there's just so many takeaways from this conversation. I think it's always it's very refreshing for us to speak to like a true creative, and I think everything that I was looking forward to in this conversation really came to life in a really cool way. And I try my best not to have too much expectation when we sit in the chairs because you just never know where it can go. But like, you know, there's certain things of like courting yourself or even the conversation around the weather. And one thing that maybe you know or don't know that has really struck me is the "can we just be friends" comment to Quincy, because I think that as creatives, who you surround yourself with, the energy you surround yourself with, and the nature of that energy in different times is so incredibly important. And the right energy of, hey, actually right now, the energy of this relationship should be just friendship.
Yeah.
And that's what I need to incubate and grow, rather than if you change the nature of that relationship, it would change the nature of the space and the energy. And all of a sudden your creativity is different. Yeah.
And it's also about saying, we have time.
Yeah, we have time.
We have time. Let's start where we are. We have time.
Yeah.
You know?
I was going to ask Jacob to help us solve a creative problem.
No, go for it.
Yeah.
Can you help us solve a creative problem and a musical problem? Which one is it? Bottom? Okay. So we are crafting a new graphic intro for the show.
Oh, yeah.
And we have sent this animation to a few friends to... Here, hold on.
I'll come in the shop.
Yeah.
Hello.
We've sent this animation to a few friends to see if they can create a sound.
Okay.
And we want a sound that brings you into this conversation. It's short and that can sustain and kind of stand for what this space is.
It's a good graphic. I love that.
What would you like? What does anything hit you? Is there any direction that you could give us here? Because we've heard a lot, and we were like, we should ask Jacob what he thinks about this.
Okay, so circles is the first thing.
And then
so circles are about like round, simple sounds. So like a sine wave is a circle. That's what it looks like. Like a. So I wouldn't do something too edgy or brassy or like jagged. I would do something that goes, you know. And then you got like combining circles. So I almost feel like it's about using a very small set of sounds that are very identifiable and like emotionally resonant. Like, oh, that's that sound. I know that sound, and it kind of tickles around a little bit. And then I love this bit at the end where it goes like this. Yeah. And I feel like that to me is like it's sort of one becomes three. So you kind of go something like that. So So you go.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
That's cool.
That's great. That was really helpful.
I can see it.
Yeah, I'm down to help anytime. Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
Honestly.
Cool.
That's great.
That was helpful. Yeah, those three coming apart is kind of like, sitting down with Jacob Collier and spending 2 hours kind of
pulling it apart.
Dissecting.
Right.
I love that. That's cool. Yeah, that's beautiful.
And seeing the different layers.
That's very good. That's very good.
Man, well, I would love to come see you play live, perform live. Like Djesse Volume 4 is absolutely fantastic. I don't know what my favorite song is on the album, but I will say the most pleasant surprise is when Well comes on.
Oh yeah, right.
Because you kind of don't expect it.
Yeah.
And it's like this rock song that you're listening and it emerges and you're like, wow, that's powerful.
Right, cool.
Yeah,
that's
and
great.
I love that. And then Bridge Over Troubled Waters, as you go through the album and you kind of come out on that side of it, it's like this, I don't know, euphoric feeling.
It's an important moment in the album.
It's an important moment. Yeah. It's, again, I mentioned this to you. I don't remember if we were recording or not, but intentionally sitting down and listening to the album, top to bottom, is a really beautiful experience. And just one that I don't feel like I get as much anymore. And this album is meant to be listened to.
It
like
was
that.
definitely crafted for that, for that exact purpose, and crafted in a way where there's things to discover each time.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you like it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and sitting down with us. We don't get to speak with that many musicians. And it's really enjoyable. We had AJR on the show. We had Ty Verdes on the show a long time ago. And there's something really nice about interviewing musicians for us, because I'll be in the car and a song comes on the radio and I'm like, oh, that's Ty.
Yeah,
or
right.
That's AJR. Or like, oh, now I'm thinking about Jacob.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's a really nice thing about having musicians on this show.
That's cool. That's cool.
Very happy to add you to the list of musicians that have been here.
My total pleasure, honestly, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like you've really brought your bedroom to the world, which is
that's cool.
Which is something that's like very YouTube. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in a sense.
Like,
in a sense.
Like, here's what I do in my bedroom, and I'm going to bring it to the world. Like, whether it's on stage or on, it's just such a cool thing.
I think a lot about this. Is the last thing I'll say. I think a lot about the idea of home and what home means. And I think home used to mean those four walls. That was my home in London, in a space where I learned to walk and speak and sing and play. And now the idea that room is not a room anymore. That room is the world, in a sense. It's like we are all in the room. We are all at home. Home is where you are. I think that's a nice thing to have found myself learning over the course of time.
Amazing. Thank you for bringing your home to us.
Thanks, you guys. Cheers.